the protagonist Shinobu fought with his main opponent, who tried to use the help of 4 divine spirits. The evil and insane man, feeling his superiority, decided that now he could become a true god. But Shinobu was not going to give up and let this scoundrel do whatever he wanted, so he used the 6th level of summoning magic. Thanks to this, he was able to summon Seraphim Gabrielle, a beautiful girl with incredible powers who instantly rushed to his aid. Shinobu noticed the bewilderment on his opponent's face and snidely asked him to repeat about his plans to become a god. Gabrielle's power both instilled confidence in the guy and made his opponent worried. The strength Shinobu was trying to achieve far surpassed that of a human, and he was eager to become strong as quickly as possible, though he would have to start from the 1st level to do so. Shortly before these events, Shinobu was quite an ordinary guy and wasn't going to fight monsters at all. The only thing he cared about was the nasty Ochim who had sneakily deleted his account in the game this time. Ayumu was the worst manifestation of his stepfather and truly hated his stepson. This man constantly reminded Shinobu of his own father's death, and the predicament they found themselves in afterward. After all, his mother had died even earlier, and so the boy along with his sister were left without a place to live. Ayumu was actually a friend of his dead father's in the past, but he turned out to be a bad person. Ayumu constantly reminded the guy that he should be grateful for such kindness, and Shinobu couldn't argue. Shinobu had inherited a fortune enough to live an impoverished life, and when Shinobu and his sister were left without parents and a home, all their debts were transferred to the children. But Ayumu paid them off and took the orphans in. Shinobu didn't understand Ayumu's motives for doing so, because he didn't care about them at all. He didn't care about the adopted children, and the government only provided minimal help in this case. That was why Shinobu tried to work part-time in his spare time. Shinobu had already forgotten what loving care was and didn't know how to enjoy it. The only thing that stopped him from ending his life was his sister, for whom he continued to live. For fun, Shinobu conquered into the virtual world of the game La Vida. This wonderful game allowed the guy to feel free and gave complete freedom of action in the vast open wastelands. The game was so popular that it had more than 30 million registered players, and Shinobu was among the top players. Shinobu took his game very seriously, but now something happened that he didn't expect at all. The boy was in despair at his stepfather's action and asked why he had deleted his account in the first place. Ayumu, smiling gloatingly, explained to his stepson that since he was going to move out of his house after graduation, in that case he didn't need the games anymore. Ayumi's angry stepfather did not hide his feelings at all and advised the boy to take this act as revenge. Suddenly, Shinobu felt like he was in a completely different place and didn't immediately realize what had happened because he had just been talking to his stepfather. Everything seemed too blurry, and there were traces of blood and the smell of burning on his hands. The boy decided to look around and saw an unrealistically beautiful landscape in front of him, though his senses of smell and touch felt too real for it to be like a dream. Shinobu gradually began to realize that he had seen a place like this somewhere before. Then, an information window suddenly appeared, welcoming him to the world of La Vida Online. Shinobu immediately realized that somehow, unbelievably, he was in the world of his favorite game. The memories were too vague and also precipitous, but Shinobu realized that if he was here, then most likely in reality he had already died, and it was a terrifying discovery for the young man. Although Shinobu had no recollection of the moment of his death, nor did he know exactly how it happened. In the meantime, the information window offered to start training and register a new player's name, and if there was an existing account, it was suggested to simply log into it. Shinobu perfectly remembered the data of his former account, but as it turned out, the nasty stepfather really deleted it, and it was impossible to restore the lost data. This news only shook the young guy that he almost cried from despair, because he spent a lot of time and effort to develop his account and achieved incredible success in the game. Suddenly, a rather large glowing ball appeared nearby and Shinobu decided that he should probably follow the ball. It was obvious that he would have to retake the training if there was no way to restore his old account and would have to start from the first level, which was a very unpleasant task. Shinobu also didn't understand what would happen to him when he died in this game, and he was also worried about his sister, because he didn't know what was happening to Megumi. Following the glowing ball, Shinobu eventually encountered a huge skeleton and remembered how this had happened to him before. As it turned out, this monster was a dead knight, given to destroy players with a level of at least 7th, and such unexpected encounters with monsters were quite normal for this game. Although this kind of skeletons hadn't happened before during training, Shinobu decided to repel the attack, because the skeleton knight was already approaching. The guy threw the first blows and felt the body move just as he had imagined. Shinobu was not going to die in his first battle, and therefore it was necessary to destroy the enemy as quickly as possible. To do so, the guy used first level magic and directed the flames at the skeleton. Shinobu was happy with the result of his attack, because now he realized that he could hurt the enemy, but he was still scared. The Dead Knight was an excellent melee fighter, but it still had one drawback. This monster was incredibly fragile, and so Shinobu immediately gave his opponent a lightning strike that ended with a crackle of broken bones. La Vida Online was a phone game with a very complicated combat system. A parry could be cancelled with an example punch, and yet here you could create your own fighting technique. Shinobu knew this game in great detail and could understand what he would have to face. Shinobu decided that he would not lose to such monsters and immediately received a message about successfully destroying the Dead Knight. Immediately after that, the guy's level increased and he was also sent a gift box. Shinobu finally received the stamina restores, because they were usually in the gift box. All these features finally convinced Shinobu that he was in a world of virtual adventures. All this even a little like the guy, who for many years hid from the problems in this game. But suddenly something strong grabbed Shinobu and he felt his feet off the ground. As it turned out, the guy was attacked by a dead rock bird, which was recommended to be killed with a level of at least 15th. Shinobu was outraged at his situation, because no one had ever been able to defeat him before. After reaching a great height, the rock bird loosened its grip and Shinobu, realizing that he was about to die, flew downwards. Before he died, Shinobu thought of his beloved sister Megumi. But then after a terrifying blow, the guy was resurrected again and found himself at the very beginning of the game. Everything is before the system offered to start training, and also advised to register his new name. But this time there was a warning that the player would receive fines and punishment if he died. Shinobu was puzzled, for he had indeed just died and it was very unpleasant. Shinobu then noticed that his level had actually increased to level 2, and was now being offered zombie attack training. In fact, this game had a lot of holes. In the middle was that you could not get a penalty for dying during the training, because the developers did not think that it is possible to die during the training. Not many players knew about this feature, because most of them skipped the initial training to save time and start the game immediately. But Shinobu realized that now at stake is his life and any mistake could be fatal for him. That's why he decided to use this system until he could raise his level high enough. As it turned out, this training could be repeated several times, so it was a great opportunity to increase his level. Shinobu only had to repeat his actions and die in time. Then suddenly a message arrived in the friend chat, though Shinobu remembered that he didn't have any friends. After confirming receipt of the message, Shinobu was surprised by the sheer number of windows appearing with all sorts of different names. The guy finally realized that there were more reborn people like him in this virtual world. Shinobu suddenly found his sister's name among them, as well as the name of his scumbag stepfather. Shinobu didn't understand how his beloved sister was also in this afterlife virtual world, because the last thing he remembered was his stepfather's words of vengeance. Then Shinobu remembered his stepfather talking about his love for the boy's mother and regretting her death. It was also obvious from his words that Shinobu's mom absolutely did not see Ayumi as a loving person. The cunning stepfather himself explained that he had waited many years until he was older, and then realized that in this world everything is decided by money, and sought to get rich. Ayumi blamed Shinobu's father for taking Shoko away while he waited 14 years to be by her side. And then after 12 years of married life, Shoko died and he had to shelter the pathetic orphans to achieve his goal. Ayumi explained that if he had been rich much earlier, his fate would have turned out differently, and it was Shinobu's father who was to blame for his wife's death. All this angered the guy, because it seemed like complete nonsense. Then the vile stepfather told how after he became rich he immediately ruined his father's company, and as a result the bank refused to help him. Shinobu's father dared to borrow money from very dangerous people, and it all led to his death because he couldn't handle his problems. Ayuma recalled that he then found the children of his enemy and considers Shinobu a cursed bastard who absolutely resembles his dead father. Ayumi enjoyed watching Shinobu's reaction and admitted that that was the look he wanted to see. After all, that was what revenge for the death of his beloved Shoko was all about. Ayumi explained that he had wanted to tell the whole truth for a long time and to do so before Shinobu and his sister left his house. Ayumi then stated that Megumi looked a lot like her mother and that was fine, because that was how he felt the strong desire to not be together. Such words angered Shinobu, for he was now very much overstepping the threshold of what was acceptable. Ayumi reminded that he is too cruel, and since Shoko did not become his wife, in that case he will possess Megumi, who will be a worthy replacement for his mother, and he will love her with pleasure and enjoy her young body. Ayumi also of course admitted to deleting Shinobu's account, as he was pleased to cause pain and annoyance to the young man, especially since he plays the game himself. Shinobu was surprised to hear about it. Ayumi explained that he had only recently started playing this game and was able to reach rank 5 already, but looked at Shinobu's conservation. Ayumi admitted that he was surprised to find out that Shinobu had already reached level 93 without spending a single penny, so he decided to splurge and upgrade his character with money. Shinobu was incredibly resentful of his stepfather's behavior, because unlike him, he couldn't spend money on the game. He also explained that this game has a complex combat system, which means that even without a strong weapon, you can easily defeat an enemy superior in strength. But Ayumi was completely confident in his abilities, because he had never before seen an ordinary player defeat a character who buys everything he needs with real money. At that moment, Megumi climbed up on the roof of the building and warned about the terrible fire, and then asked her brother to immediately get out of here with her. Ayumi was certainly not going to die on that roof, especially not with the orphans he hated. But then there was a terrifying explosion and a huge cloud of deadly flames engulfed everyone in the building. Shinobu tried to protect his sister and held her tightly in his arms, but he understood that it was almost impossible to survive in this situation, and the only consolation for the guy was that in the last moment of his life he was near his beloved sister Megumi. But then there was an error in the system of transferring important data that ended with Shinobu's participation in the event of summoning the best players. The guy finally remembered exactly how it all happened, and that terrible fall ended his life's journey. And now it was clear that thanks to the summoning of the best players, he along with Ayuma had been summoned to this game world. But in that case, it wasn't clear how exactly Megumi had gotten here. From the information Shinobu had been given, it was clear that Megumi had not died during that terrible fall. But now she was on the verge of life and death, and when her meter went to 0 she would be in this game world. The guy decided to keep a close eye on his sister's meter so as not to miss the moment of her appearance. And when her meter goes down to 0 she will appear here and be by his side again. But the main disappointment was that Ayumi was already here, and he obviously wouldn't give up his intentions to get Megumi. Shinobu was determined to save his beloved sister by all means, but the main thing now was to figure out where to start, because it was obvious that his nasty stepfather considered him a useless character, and he needed to become stronger as soon as possible. But suddenly at this moment Shinobu felt a piercing pain in his body, because he was attacked from behind by a cursed skeleton knight. The guy instantly turned around and repelled the enemy's attack. After that, Shinobu decided to start his new game and turn the skeleton monster into fodder for his level by destroying it with a magic strike. La Vida Online is a game world in which an ordinary guy Shinobu managed to be reborn after his death. At this point he had only 252 hours to gain as much strength and protect his beloved sister Megumi. To do this, the guy chose the path of pumping his character through his own death, because he must protect his sister in this dangerous world. Shinobu bravely fought the enemy in the form of an aggressive skeleton knight and gained well-deserved experience. With each new victory, Shinobu increased his level, although he realized that the monsters in this game world were not the only danger. Shinobu found out that in this game world players can also kill each other, which meant that at any moment he could be attacked by other people who were also in this virtual world. He decided to raise the maximum number of levels as quickly as possible, because that was the only way he could face the deadly danger in the future game. And although now Shinobu was still very weak, but he decided to use special cheats in order to increase his strength as quickly as possible. With each increase in his level, the guy began to die less, but it became harder for him to fight when there were a lot of opponents. Shinobu really wanted to learn how to use summoning magic as soon as possible, because thanks to it he could fight much more effectively. The guy's main profession was summoner, and it was that he could summon various creatures to fight on his side. Summoned creatures are usually obtained from various events or gacha, but since Shinobu's previous account had been sneakily deleted by his stepfather, he had no achievements now. Shinobu cursed his stepfather, because before he could even summon the very strong character Gabrielle. Seraphim Gabrielle was one of the strongest creatures in the game, and Shinobu had to work hard to get this character. But Shinobu still tried to calm down, because it was not important to worry about the past, But to think about the current situation, during the training, one must follow strictly the specified places, and as a punishment, a strong monster appears, which very much slows down the player in his endeavors. That's why Shinobu decided to take this opportunity and not finish his training, continuing to violate the defined route. Eventually, the guy managed to reach the ancient ruins, which is one of the most difficult dungeons with high-level monsters. This was the best place to quickly level up, and that's what Shinobu wanted to achieve. Usually these difficult dungeons located in ancient ruins players pass closer to the end of the game. But Shinobu decided to speed up his development at the expense of such a difficult place. The boy of course realized that this world was no longer the same game he had been playing, but now it was his new life. Shinobu had never before imagined that his fate would turn out this way. As soon as Shinobu was outside the doors leading to the dungeon, he used magic to light his way, and was impressed by the scale of the room. There were many skeletons of warriors everywhere who were ready to defend this dungeon and fight until they were destroyed. Shinobu decided to start the battle immediately and did not waste time and rushed to meet thousands of opponents, gaining important experience. But after doing as much as possible in this situation, Shinobu died again and found himself back at the beginning of his journey, but with more experience. This cheater tactic made him constantly die and go through unbearable pain, but still gain precious experience and reborn again. This constant cycle of events gradually drove Shinobu crazy, and the only thing that made her not give up in this situation and keep repeating the same thing was of course her sister Megumi. Shinobu remembered noticing that his sister was very upset and asked Megumi what was bothering her. She explained that when Shinobu went to college, she would leave home, and she didn't want to be alone with her stepfather. Megumi was afraid of Ayumi, and despite his kind attitude towards her, she was always waiting for something bad to happen. But Shinobu rushed to calm her upset sister and explained that he was going to take her with him from the beginning, because he didn't want to leave her alone with that bastard Ayumi either. Shinobu promised to always be there for his beloved sister, and so they would live together. Megumi was happy at that moment and then decided to take advantage of the situation and offered her brother to share all the housework in that case. Shinobu was constantly thinking about his sister, and his goal was to protect this girl. The boy had already reached the level after which he would be able to learn a new spell, and this was a real achievement of his cunning strategy for gaining experience. Shinobu decided that he would now be able to pass this dangerous dungeon because he had learned how to use level 4 magic. The perfect spell was a small nuclear explosion that destroyed everything around it, leaving no chance for the monsters. Thanks to this spell to destroy a huge number of opponents, and now Shinobu has already reached the 50th level. But when reaching this high level, experience from weaker monsters could no longer be obtained, and now it was necessary to find a stronger and bigger opponent. Shinobu went to meet the huge boss and remembered that it had been a long time since his last visit to this place. The terrifying boss turned out to be an immortal undead king with level 95, and he also always had his loyal army of dead people around him. The undead king instantly noticed the presence of a human and immediately used his terrifying spell Death Sentence, which was so strong that it could destroy even the highest ranked game character. That was exactly what happened to Shinobu, and he reappeared at the very beginning of the path. It was amazing for him to die from a single blow, but it was still better than dying from the many wounds received from the skeletons. Shinobu decided to go to the immortal undead control again. After all, he was no worse than this monster and had also been resurrected many times. But as it turned out, this test was very serious, and Shinobu constantly died trying to get to the king of the undead. At some point, the guy even stopped counting how many times he had to return to this place and repeat this vicious circle. But still, the moment of truth came, and Shinobu was able to overcome the huge army of skeletons and deliver a crushing blow to the boss with the help of the spell Rose of Hades. With his level 4 magic, Shinobu applied full magical defense, and as a result, he was finally able to completely destroy the undead king's defense. But it was still a long way away from complete victory. It was a huge advantage that Shinobu knew all of the undead king's weaknesses, so he used Seraphim's Summon, which was only available at the 4th level of magic. But the undead king was not going to give up so easily and was able to deliver a fatal blow to the guy, once again confirming his strength and endurance. But just at that moment, Shinobu decided to take a desperate step and use the 3rd level magic, namely the suicide spell. This spell was one of the common self-destruction techniques that consumed a huge amount of life and magic energy. In this game, such a skill was as powerful as it was dangerous, but was rarely used by players due to the death penalties. But there was no choice in this situation, as Shinobu would continue to die further until he defeated the undead king. In the next moment, Shinobu once again returned to the starting point after his death, but this time the guy didn't know for sure if he had lost to the Undead King or if he was all able to destroy him. But everything cleared up in a few seconds when the information window reported the destruction of the Undead Lord. As a reward, Shinobu received the special cloak of the one who surpassed wisdom itself. Shinobu was incredibly happy with his success, as he was finally able to defeat this practically invulnerable boss and also received a nice bonus in the form of the cloak. All these countless attempts to destroy the undead cities have greatly tired the guy, and he felt incredibly tired, although he was able to reach the 72nd level. In this game, most of the mobs were at level 10. Kings, heroes, and their kind of characters usually boasted level 50. Shinobu could finish his cheating level pumping. After all, he had achieved significant results. That said, the guy remembered that his last account was at level 99. After some thought, Shinobu decided that it was unlikely that he would be able to level up even more, so he put on his gear. The available equipment included the short staff of the sage who ruled over death, the light armor of the king, the armor of the dead, the ring of death, and the cloak of the one who surpassed wisdom itself. Shinobu decided to move on, and to complete his training he needed to touch the orb. But before doing so, all that remained was to register his name, and Shinobu decided to leave it at that. Shinobu confirmed his name during the registration process, and thus completed his protracted training. The system reported that as a reward for completing his training, Shinobu would receive a profession skill selection sphere, and also receive the skill Heaven's Fury. This was the first time Shinobu had encountered such a bonus and didn't know what a profession skill sphere was. But then the guy remembered that he heard about something like this in the next update of the game, and also there indicated the presence of a new skill, Rage of Heaven. But then suddenly everything around lit up with a bright flash, which turned into a huge mechanism consisting of many gears. Thus there was a global update of the game, as well as the authorization of the account after which the game was logged in. Suddenly a friendly female voice came from behind and greeted Shinobu. The guy turned around and was surprised to see a lightly dressed young beauty in front of him. The girl explained in a pleasant voice that she was the administrator of the game La Vida Online, and was happy to meet a new player. Shinobu looked at the stranger with disbelief. This was a girl he had never seen before in his many years of playing the game. As it turned out, a girl calling herself the administrator of the game appears immediately after defeating a very strong opponent. The guy was very surprised to meet the game administrator and asked the girl if she really called all the people in the game. The girl explained that a fire started and then the event happened. But then the game administrator apologized for not knowing the details of what happened in Shinobu's former life, because she was not privy to such information. The girl then explained that the player Shinobu Ijima is the first to go to the Key of Agartha, and as a reward, Shinobu was given a new task of 13 steps on the way to the perfect city. Shinobu was surprised, because he thought the game should start right after the training. Then he remembered that he had heard about the Agartha key somewhere. All of this was a consequence of the global updates that were often released in such popular games. These events were milestone events, and the Agartha key was supposed to add a lot of new things to the game. But as far as Shinobu could remember, it was still about 2 months away, and it wasn't clear why he was the first participant in the quest. The admin girl decided to clarify the information, but it turned out that player identification was impossible at the moment, and after that, like scanning the data. But any attempts to find out detailed information about the player Shinobu ended in failure, because all the data of the player was completely deleted, and the admin girl did not know what to do. Shinobu was surprised by the girl's reaction, for she even fell to her knees in despair, and tried to compare Shinobu's old data with the updated information. After a few minutes of studying the information, the girl reported that Shinobu's account was not authorized, and the person who logged into the account had deleted all the data. The receptionist then informed that a full restoration of the previous account had been requested, but that it would take time. Shinobu was very excited to be able to restore his past comprehension. The girl explained that although the login was not authorized, but selling items and resetting the deletion of the past account is not prohibited by the rules of the game, and now it is unlikely to be possible to fully restore the lost data. But it is possible to recover everything Shinobu ever received from the gachai. The administrator then downloaded Shinobu's data from the test server. That's why Shinobu was the first to go to the global update of the game. Shinobu tried to realize everything that was happening and still couldn't accept the complete loss of his achievements, although of course the possibility of regaining lost items was not a bad consolation. The boy asked her to explain more about the situation, but the girl apologized and explained that she had nothing more to say about it. Shinobu realized that there was no hope of fully restoring his previous account and all the items he had earned. The guy then explained that he didn't know absolutely exactly who deleted his past account, but the girl replied that unfortunately the time of their conversation had come to an end, and it was time for Shinobu to start his quest of 13 steps to the perfect city. Shinobu tried to explain that he still had so many questions for the girl, but the process of moving had already begun. The receptionist said that she had nothing more to say to Shinobu as the most difficult task, the perfect city in the middle of the world, had already begun. A few seconds later, Shinobu in a dark cave that he never really got to learn anything useful. Shinobu decided that if the upgrade could only be used by him, then that meant he could find many useful items. Key of Agartha was a hierarchical dungeon and Shinobu found himself on the first floor. The only rule and condition for victory was to destroy the bosses that sought to destroy the player. Escape was only possible after clearing the floor or in the event of death. Shinobu realized that since his training was already over, it meant that death would quite possibly be his last. It was frustrating to realize that there was no margin for error. But then the boy remembered the admin girl telling him that she had been able to recover his gacha items. The next unpleasant news was that Shinobu's summoning menu was completely disabled and he couldn't summon anyone. The summoner was actually a very unpopular class in this game, and summoners are not subject to revival from players. That was why they always had to revive in the city. Shinobu decided that he was doomed to die in that case and asked the administrator to resurrect him and restore him. It also became obvious that there was no other way but to go through the first floor of this dungeon. But Shinobu began to get very worried because he had no idea what kind of monsters lived here. After a while, he met a monster that looked like a goblin. Shinobu was surprised because such monsters were very weak and could be defeated even by a novice. But still the guy decided to check the status of the opponent, when as it turned out it was a legendary goblin, to destroy which was recommended to have a level of at least at 5th. Shinobu was horrified, because this monster was much stronger than any players. The legendary goblin immediately launched a swift attack. Shinobu remembered that after the last update, a special patch was released that fixed the levels. After that, the maximum level that could be reached stopped at 130th level, and the maximum level of monsters stopped at 99th. Shinobu felt the danger and couldn't understand how the goblin was stronger than the undead king. Seeing the enemy approaching him quickly, Shinobu decided to destroy him as quickly as possible. Shinobu used a magic spell that was supposed to shackle the legendary goblin, because it was dangerous to fight him on equal terms. Shinobu hoped that the enemy would not be able to escape from such a trap. But expectations were not met and the legendary goblin immediately destroyed the powerful chains. The ferocious monster instantly approached Shinobu, and the guy felt the breath of death. But Shinobu decided to fight to the end, because he could die so easily. It was a critical situation and Shinobu once again decided to use the 3rd level magic spell Suicide. The legendary goblin felt unbearable pain. But as it turned out, Shinobu was only able to take away a small portion of the monster's life force. This was outrageous, since such a powerful spell had destroyed the undead king last time. Now the guy was unsure if he would be able to defeat the opponent with so much remaining strength. Shinobu didn't waste any time applying the recovery sphere, because it was the only chance to continue fighting for his life. Every time a player levels up in this game, they receive a recovery orb. This useful magic item completely restored life and magic energy, and also increased stamina to the maximum. Shinobu decided that since the suicide spell was consuming his life energy, he should use this powerful spell and immediately recover with the sphere, because that was the only way to defeat such a strong opponent. At the moment, Shinobu had 75 such recovery spheres in her inventory, and of course it was a pity to waste such important items. But still, it was better than dying at the hands of a legendary goblin. Shinobu began to use the suicide spell as quickly as possible and immediately restore his life force. The legendary goblin was shocked by such an incredible onslaught, and was losing strength very quickly, not even having time to attack back. In the end, the ferocious monster sighed and collapsed to the ground for the last time, and Shinobu heard the message about another level increase, as well as the receipt of an item. The first floor was completely cleared, and as a reward, Shinobu received a salvation skill sphere. Shinobu decided to find out the details of the item. As it turned out, after many players criticized that summoners could not revive and recover from other players' magic, the developers added a special skill that allowed summoners to do so. Shinobu found out that creature summons were now available to him. This instilled confidence in the guy, because now he could be so unafraid of being attacked during further adventures. Then there was a message from the game administrator that a global update was available, and Shinobu decided to find out the details. As it turned out, this message was intended for all players of La Vida Online, and now Shinobu was not the only one with new features. New dungeons, skills, and level limit fixes were added to the game along with many other additions. All players summoned to this location receive updates from the last player's login date. The last player's login date was listed as October 23rd. Shinobu realized that his sister's second life would start at level 1 if she died, in which case she would be gone forever, and so it was necessary to protect Megumi. Shinobu decided that in this new world, saving and taking care of his sister would be his main goal. But to do so, he needed to constantly become stronger. Meanwhile, the admin girl finished informing the players about the new features and wished everyone a pleasant game. Shinobu realized that from now on he was starting to fight against time. Aaron and Claire had been running for a long time, that now they had nothing to fear and were safe. Claire asked the boy if his sister was really hunting those monsters and that everything was alright. Aaron advised the girl not to worry about it. The guy explained that his sister has reached the heights and has already become a captain of warriors, and he also heard that a warlock should come and save them. But the boy and the girl didn't even realize that they were being watched by a terrible monster who saw them as prey. The monster was very quickly near the teenagers, and it really scared the guy and the girl. Aaron ordered Claire to run away immediately, but the girl didn't want to leave the guy back home with the monster. An intense fear gripped Claire, but the guy kept demanding her to run away. The girl still started to run away, saving her life, and Aaron, showing incredible courage, decided to delay the monster and give Claire a chance to run away as far as possible. Aaron mentally apologized to his sister for the fact that he was unlikely to return home. But although he had to save Claire, and it would be the last important thing for him. But as it turned out, the monster was not alone, and a second vile creature blocked Claire's escape route. Aaron was horrified when he heard the girl scream. Claire found herself in the monster's huge hand, which enjoyed its superiority over the little girl. Gradually, the monster's hand clenched, causing pain and fear to Claire. Aaron could not watch the girl suffer and tried to attack the monster, but his weapon was completely useless and scattered in his hands. The guy was horrified by what was happening and hoped for someone's help. The abominable creature laughed happily, watching the girl in agony, but then something incredible happened and the monster's huge arm was severed. The terrifying roar of the wounded monster spread for many kilometers, and the girl began to rapidly fall down and did not even understand what exactly happened. But then in some strange way, Claire did not hit the ground, but began to float. The girl looked with surprise at Aaron, who also did not understand what exactly was happening. But in fact, the girl was in the arms of Shibuno, who was completely invisible to everyone around thanks to his magical abilities. Shibuno had used the 4th level transparent curtain spell, which allowed him to be invisible to almost all creatures in this game. Usually people in this world were victimized by monsters, and Shibuno sometimes wanted to leave things as they were and not interfere in someone else's fate. But the guy was well aware that if he did exactly that, he would never forgive himself for it. After saving Claire, Shibuno decided to deal with the huge monsters that could help gain even more experience. A magic strike of incredible strength powerfully struck towards the monsters and instantly destroyed the opponents. Shibuno was happy with the result, because his level 80 power was so powerful that it not only destroyed the monsters, but also felled many large trees. The guy then decided to test how strong his magic was. Shibuno used a magic spell level 500 blades, and this terrifying weapon instantly ended the existence of the remaining monsters. In the game La Vida Online, having already the 30th level, you can become a warrior captain or a great wizard. Shibuno felt that he shouldn't stand out with his power either, but level 80 was certainly different in its capabilities. Shibuno realized that having such power and using such powerful spells, he would not be able to be unnoticed among the other players. Aaron and Claire looked at the unknown savior with surprise and didn't know what to expect from this mysterious guy. Shibuno looked carefully at the frightened teenagers and explained that he couldn't just leave them in danger like that. After that, Shibuno activated his enemy detection skill, which resembled a real radar, but only powered by magical energy. Soon, a group of armed men could be found, and there was also a group of level 20 ogres nearby. Shibuno decided that with those levels, they had absolutely no chance of survival. Shibuno decided not to waste time and help these people escape from the monsters, and then use the 3rd level flight magic spell to get to the right place as quickly as possible. Shibuno flew away instantly, and Aaron and Claire could not believe in their magical rescue for a long time, and finally decided that God's help had come to them. Meanwhile, Leslie, the captain of the warriors, asked Jacob, the famous adventurer, for he was the only hope in this dangerous situation. The girl asked Jacob to use the miraculous flame to clear the way for further movement. Jacob continued to read the book and asked her to leave him alone. Jacob explained that his time was worth a lot of money, so he didn't have time to listen to silly compliments and useless flattery. But Leslie explained that she had only come to inform Jacob of what had happened and that the higher orcs had been discovered nearby. The girl explained that there were 100 monsters and that such information should definitely interest and attract Jacob's attention. And if even these horrible monsters didn't interest the famous adventurer, there was even more important information that Jacob needed to hear about. Leslie asked him not to remain indifferent and try to surprise everyone with his abilities. Then the excited girl explained that huge ogres had been discovered nearby, and it was sure to be a huge problem for everyone. Jacob was interested in the ogres and slammed his book shut, then said that if that was all Leslie wanted to talk about, there was still plenty of time. Leslie apologized for her rudeness and told Jacob how one of her soldiers had seen something that looked like a horde of ogres last night. Jacob only snorted unhappily and then asked why stupid people always caused so much trouble. Jacob explained that even he couldn't handle a horde of ogres alone, and that if a simple warrior had actually encountered such dangerous monsters, he simply couldn't stay alive. So now this useless conversation should be stopped and Leslie will be punished for wasting her time, because the report about such terrible monsters looks implausible. Then Jacob began to hint to Leslie about intimacy with him and promised that she would like this punishment very much, and maybe she would even want to do it again. Jacob suggested that she have dinner with him tonight so that he could appreciate her beauty and forgive her for her mistakes. Leslie had heard many times how much Jacob has a weakness for beautiful girls, and if she agreed to his proposal he would continue to insist on intimacy. The girl eventually decided to achieve her goal at all costs, and decided to exercise feminine cunning. Leslie asked Jacob if he could really use level 2 magic. Jacob began to boast and declared that he had truly comprehended all the heights of humanity, and knew the highest fire magic, and the name of that magic was ordinary flame. Leslie began to admire Jacob's abilities as convincingly as possible. He said that in a year he would have to make some adjustments to his abilities, but Leslie didn't understand that and pretended to listen attentively. Jacob explained that he was close to becoming king of the fire dragons and that it would be a great achievement in his career. Leslie marveled at Jacob's words and wondered if second-level magic could do that. Jacob explained that his title would change from Flame Miracle Worker to Fire Dragon King. Leslie decided that if that was true, then this man was a very capable wizard. That means that thanks to his magical abilities he will definitely be able to defeat the monsters, and in this case she will be able to protect Claire and Aaron with all her might. Just at that moment one of the knights came running and said that the monsters were already here. Leslie inquired about the number of orcs, but as it turned out they were not orcs at all. The agitated and shaken soldier said that they were attacked by the ogres and could not withstand the fury of the monsters. Leslie was horrified at the sight of the huge and ferocious monsters and lost her composure as well as her ability to lead the monsters. Leslie saw her soldiers dying and could not do anything about it, because all the warnings about the ogres were true. But after a few minutes the girl remembered who she was and ordered her soldiers to get up and fight immediately. After all, victory must be achieved at any cost, especially if Mr. Jacob would help them with his miraculous flame. But Mr. Jacob was in no hurry to help the common warriors and reminded them that he had almost achieved the title he desired and so he must leave everyone. Leslie was shocked by Jacob's despicable act and could not believe that he was abandoning them at this critical moment. But Jacob stated that he is too talented and time is money to him, so he is absolutely not going to die here with everyone else fighting horrible monsters. Leslie said that only together they could defeat so many ogres and reminded them of the deal they had made earlier. Jacob hissed angrily at Leslie's words and reluctantly admitted that of course they couldn't break the deal. But then Jacob laughed evilly and declared that if everyone died, then no one would ever know about the deal he'd broken. Leslie was shocked by this terrible betrayal and looked doomed at the approaching ogres. The girl immediately thought of her brother and sister. Leslie apologized for not being able to protect Aaron and Claire and realized that now she would not be able to get out alive. But just at that moment Shinubo appeared and dealt fatal blows to one of the ogres, who obviously did not expect to meet such a brave man. Leslie was surprised and shocked by the appearance of the uninvited savior who showed wonders of courage. Shinubo thought again that it is very difficult for him to get used to his incredible power, because this power can protect people, and that is why he wants to destroy monsters in any situation. Leslie was shocked by the ogre attack. The attack of these monsters was like a natural disaster that destroys everything in its path. But then something incredible happened and a man appeared that no one expected to see, and it changed the situation dramatically. Shinobu's first blow destroyed one of the huge monsters and gave hope to the seemingly doomed people. Shinobu realized that his blade was broken, so he had to rely on magic. In addition to strong magic spells, it was still possible to use strong weapons that would be able to destroy the ogres. Shinobu's sudden appearance frightened the huge ogres, who instantly began to flee at the sight of their kin's death. Shinobu was surprised by the ogre's behavior, as he thought that level 80 monsters should be much more dangerous. This group of warriors, even with their numerical advantage, could not withstand the monster's attack, as they all seemed to be weaklings. Shinobu decided to help these doomed people, only because they were too weak to fight as equals. But the fact that Shinobu stood out from the ordinary warriors was starting to bother him constantly. Shinobu didn't want to draw attention to himself, because it could lead to bad results. Shinobu decided not to take off his disguise and tried to act completely unnoticed by the other characters. Then Shinobu heard an annoyed voice demanding him to stop. Jacob Hazen, the 20th level wizard, demanded that Shinobu immediately explain who he was. The boy replied that he was just a simple adventurer who happened to be in the neighborhood. Jacob continued to be indignant, for he had never seen Shinobu before, and now he had ruined his plans. Shinobu immediately determined that Jacob has the highest level among everyone here, even though he looks aggressive. Shinobu decided to equal this guy's level and ability, and then asked if Jacob can really use attack magic. Jacob admitted that it was very strange for him to hear such an unusual question, and it was also nice to see an adventurer who didn't know about his great abilities yet. Shinobu apologized and decided to find out more about the wizard. Jacob, thinking he was a foolish village boy, promised to tell him who he really was, for he was the man they called the Fire Dragon King. Shinobu guessed that this narcissistic wizard was referring to the Fire Dragon King's breath ability. It was only a 3rd level magic, and it was a good thing that he himself had a higher level magic, for it would have raised a lot of questions from the people present. Shinobu didn't want other players to discover him, and so he would need to be extremely careful in the future. The guy decided to leave the place, but Jacob asked why he was leaving. Shinobu explained to the arrogant wizard that he had to finish off the ogres before they were out of sight, and this surprised Jacob very much. The narcissistic Jacob was actually a pretty capable wizard, but his magic was too weak for Shinobu. But anyway, in the presence of this man, one would have to use low-level spells to avoid attracting attention. Shinobu used the 3rd level Fire Dragon King's breath spell, and incinerated the ogres that had not managed to hide in the nearby forests. Jacob was stunned by the village boy's abilities, for he had thought that no one else could use the Fire Dragon King's breath but him. Jacob couldn't believe it, for he had spent his whole life learning this spell, and the strange boy looked so much younger than he was and so easy to use. Shinobu noticed Jacob's angry expression and asked why he was so surprised. But the frustrated wizard demanded answers to all his questions. Shinobu didn't want to waste time with the narcissistic wizard's idle chatter, so he politely said goodbye and went on his way. But at that moment, Leslie ran up to the guy and called him a great sage. The girl cried from happiness and thanked Shinobu for his help, because thanks to his appearance they all remained alive. Shinobu asked Leslie why she thought he was a great sage, since he hadn't done anything special, but had only helped deal with the monsters. The excited girl explained that since Shinobu used 3rd level magic, which can only be used by people no lower than a great sage, then he is a great sage. Shinobu laughed at such words and admitted that he was still a long way from being a great sage, and maybe that guy Jacob could show much better magical abilities. But Leslie explained that of course Jacob was a very talented sorcerer, but he still had yet to master the 3rd level of magic. In the meantime, the soldiers who had left after the battle, led by Leslie, decided to return to the capital and report on the situation and thank the great sage for their rescue. All this only upset Shinobu, because he wanted to remain as inconspicuous as possible, and now it will be told about him in the capital. And even if he were to get away from these people now, rumors about him would still spread. Shinobu then turned to the soldiers and asked if they could help him. Leslie, Jacob, and the remaining soldiers looked intently at the stranger who offered to look at his magic staff. Shinobu decided to make these men forget the recent events with a 4th level mind-altering magic spell, for that was the only way he could continue to remain invisible to the bulk of the characters. After Shinobu was once again alone with himself, he realized that he was very close to failure. Also, the guy couldn't believe that the average level was so poorly valued in this world. Only now Shinobu realized the full meaning of the admin girl's words that the last player's entry date would take place in 10 months and 23 days local time. That was when Megumi would also enter the game and begin her training. But the problem was that time flowed differently inside the game than it did in reality. What was hours in the real world seemed like months in the game world. Shinobu realized that based on such a time difference in the game he knew before, it had been over 100 years since he started playing it. Because of all this, his knowledge of the world might now be different, and basically this virtual world might now be unknown to him. Meanwhile, Leslie was looking at the aftermath of the destruction of the ogres and decided that she was saved by Mr. Jacob because she didn't remember anything about the appearance of the mysterious savior, who had erased all her memories of himself. She thanked Mr. Jacob for saving her and the whole group of warriors, for if it were not for his abilities, they would all have died at the hands of the terrible ogres. But Jacob promised never to forget how the Fire Dragon King's breath spell had been used, for it was a display of tremendous magical ability. Leslie didn't quite understand the wizard and assumed that she was the one who had used the spell. But Jacob explained that her memories had been altered by the magic spell, and so she had lost some of the events. Jacob then explained that he had never seen such a large amount of magical power before and had never expected such a thing to be possible. It was the first time Leslie had seen Jacob in such a strange state, and it surprised her. One of the knights advised everyone to go back to the capital so Jacob could calm down and then report back to the guild. But Jacob bellowed at the soldier and called him a bastard, then used his first level flame magic spells and set the innocent guy on fire. Leslie was outraged at Jacob's horrible behavior and ordered him to stop immediately and come to his senses. But Jacob said that he just didn't want the people present to be disturbed by the mind-altering magic, because then they would remember how things really were. Jacob decided to explain to the girl why the unknown guy's magic didn't work on him. Jacob showed her a shiny bracelet and said that thanks to this donated item, he was protected from such spells and remembered everything as it had happened. Leslie was shocked by the narcissistic wizard's meanness and perfidy as he continued to destroy innocent soldiers. The doomed warriors were dying in the horrible flames, letting out terrible death screams. But then Jacob declared that he would let Leslie live and so she could go wherever she wanted. But he remembered well the man who had humiliated him and decided to take revenge on him at the first opportunity. After his untimely death, Shinobu was reborn in the world of the game La Vida Online to protect his favorite sister, who will also soon be in this game world. Guy decided to become the strongest. Shinobu, after his adventures, returned to the city and first went to the Guild of Adventurers, where he asked him to register as an adventurer. But the admin girl looked at the unfamiliar guy strangely, and her piercing gaze did not please Shinobu too much. 100 years had passed since the game was created in this virtual world, and Shinobu certainly didn't know all the intricacies and rules that might have arisen during that time. That's why the guy decided to become an adventurer, because it would be easier to get important information. In the end, the admin girl explained that she had never seen such equipment and was surprised that a person with it wanted to sign up as an adventurer. The laughter of two tipsy adventurers was immediately heard from behind, who joked that apparently Shinobu's gear was sewn by his favorite mother and he was proud of it. Shinobu genuinely didn't understand what the problem was and asked for an explanation. The girl stated that the black color of the outfit belonged to the lowest class of gear. This surprised the guy and he promised to take these remarks into consideration, but he still wanted to register as an adventurer. The girl continued to stare at the stranger incredulously and decided that he probably had big money problems. The receptionist then suggested that Shinobu put his hand on a magic ball to determine his abilities. Shinobu immediately realized that with his 80th level, this magic ball would shatter and eventually apologized, saying that he had changed his mind about joining the Adventurers Guild. The girl only sighed in relief, praising the guy for a wise decision, more important than anything else. And the motto and guild motto sounds like trading life for money. Shinobu sensed an unpleasant aura in the room and wondered at the strange motto that didn't really motivate one to be a member of the guild. Suddenly, Shinobu noticed a guy next to him who looked a lot like the narcissistic wizard he had saved with the rest of the soldiers during the ogre attack. The receptionist immediately became animated at the sight of the wizard Jacob, and she began to offer the boy to rest in the room and drink tea or coffee. Jacob accepted the offer and asked her to bring him hot flavored tea as he usually liked. Shinobu still decided not to show his face even though he remembered how he wiped the memory of these people. Then he headed for the exit to leave the guild as soon as possible. But suddenly Jacob asked Shinobu to stop and then said that this guy would go to the room with him. The admin girl was surprised, because how could some pathetic man in black gear be next to the great wizard Jacob? But Jacob disagreed with the girl and advised her to develop her ability to evaluate people as best as possible, because if she continued to make such mistakes, he would personally make sure that she would be demoted. The girl sincerely didn't understand and stated that the young lad was the simplest person, and so she had made a correct assessment of his status. Jacob explained to Shinobu that he wanted to discuss with him privately about what happened in the forest, and then called the guy a great sage. This caused Shinobu to have strange feelings, for Jacob's words felt angry and false. The admin girl quickly escorted Shinobu to the guildmaster's room, and then apologized for her earlier words. Shinobu replied that he wasn't upset about it at all, and so the girl could take it easy. Jacob offered to sit down on the comfortable couch, and then explained that there was a silence spell activated in the room so no one could overhear them. Shinobu took a quick look around the room and then asked Jacob why his memory was still intact after the spell. Jacob was surprised that this was the only thing that interested Shinobu, and then he showed off his magic bracelet. This item surprised Shinobu, for he had not expected to see such an artifact in someone like Jacob. Inside the bracelet was a mythical stone called Alexandrite Light. Such an item was very expensive and hard to find. The Light of Alexandrite was a donation item and contained a Ranka stone. Thanks to its properties, it protected its owner from all negative statuses. Shinobu asked Jacob how he managed to get his hands on this item. Jacob began to talk about how his family had received this magnificent bracelet from a heavenly sage, and it had happened over a decade ago. Jacob explained that Shinobu happened to be the first person he met who knew of the properties of the item. Jacob then stated that the two of them were not the only people who knew about such magical items, as it was passed down from generation to generation among the church, nobles, and powerful people. Jacob admitted that when he saw Shinobu, he was incredibly surprised to see such strong magical powers. After all, such people had first appeared about 100 years ago. They never aged and had the power of gods. They themselves called themselves heavenly sages and were far superior to anyone they could meet on their way. But usually such people are called divine creatures and are greatly inspired by their abilities. Shinobu was surprised at what he heard and still didn't understand what exactly Jacob wanted him to do. But then the narcissistic wizard spoke of various organizations such as the Tiger's Eye, the Dragon's Roar, the Brigade of Prosperity, and the Lions of Patriotism. It is rumored that all these organizations are ruled by divine people, and they control everything in the shadows. Therefore, because of their strong influence, the world has changed significantly in the last 100 years. All Shinobu heard were the names of the famous guilds from La Vida Online. But from what Jacob said, it was clear that he was only giving out the information he wanted. Although it was now obvious that the players had joined up with the guild and were doing what they wanted. Shinobu then asked Jacob what he wanted from him since he had invited him to this room for a secret conversation. After all, Jacob has now shared information and it's obvious that he wants something in return. But the cunning wizard began to explain that he only wanted to get in touch with Shinobu because he was interested in talking to powerful people. Moreover, it is absolutely certain that Shinobu is trying to carefully hide his real identity. Shinobu mentally cursed at this moment, for this guy was really too perceptive. Jacob explained that Shinobu had purposely tried to erase everyone's memories of himself, because he wasn't interested in anyone knowing he existed. But since it happened that they still had to meet again, it would be a good idea to develop a friendly relationship in that case. And then Jacob stated that of course he wouldn't want to give Shinobu away. The boy immediately confirmed his worst expectations of the meeting and called Jacob a blackmailer. Shinobu then reminded him that he was much stronger than Jacob, and he could kill him right here and now, and it would take less than a minute. But Jacob was prepared for the question and said that why threaten the man? Because he could have killed everyone in the forest, but he did the opposite and saved the men from the ogre invasion. Shinobu replied that the act followed his wishes and there was nothing strange about it. But Jacob thought that Shinobu was just trying to trick him, because he was probably not the kind of person who could kill someone else very easily. Shinobu thought at this point that he really didn't want to kill people, and it's also very disgusting to take the lives of people who have done nothing to him. But at that moment, Jacob said that Shinobu didn't have to worry anyway, because he personally made sure that those people would never remember anything again. Shinobu was shocked to hear that and didn't immediately understand the meaning of those words. Jacob explained that he had killed all the people who were with him in the forest, and his fire magic had turned their bodies to ash. Jacob smiled wickedly and explained that he was the only one who knew the truth about Shinobu, and the girl who had survived had been under the spell and was unlikely to remember who had saved her in the forest. Jacob explained that if he died at Shinobu's hands, Leslie would die immediately, because he had taken care of it and decided to keep himself safe. And so, judging from recent events, it would be better for them to agree and cooperate. Jacob suggested a duel, and if Shinobu wins, he swears never to reveal his secret. And if Jacob wins, Shinobu will be his slave for the rest of his life. Jacob also reminded him that even though Shinobu is a celestial, he must remember that the power of the treaty is absolute for everyone. The special treaty was part of La Vida's online game, and so enforcing the terms of the treaty is the responsibility of the system. Jacob stated that if Shinobu does not agree to duel with him, he will immediately reveal his identity to everyone and then he will have a huge pile of problems. Shinobu that if his location becomes known to everyone, his damn stepfather Ayumi will immediately show up at his place and try to kill him. And in that case, he wouldn't be able to protect his beloved sister Megumi. Jacob then suggested to equalize the terms of the battle, since his strength is much less than Shinobu's. The boy decided to end the matter as soon as possible and left his autograph under the agreement. Jacob happily announced the start of the treaty and thanked Shinobu's summoner for his agreement. Shinobu, building up anger and magical energy, asked Jacob why he was so sure he could win this battle. Although it was obvious that one should not underestimate this narcissistic wizard after he ruthlessly killed people in the forest, Jacob then explained that since he was the author of the treaty, he had the right to choose the place of the duel, and he would also use his greatest treasure. In the next moment, a joyful Jacob showed his donated item and suddenly, the movement in space began. The cozy room of the guildmaster was replaced by an eerie landscape of some ruined ancient temples and it all hung in space. Shinobu immediately felt the depressing aura of the place. Jacob kept laughing, stated that the only way to counter divine people like Shinobu was to use the power of a god. Jacob was confident that he would definitely win thanks to the god power, and suggested that the duel should start immediately. Jacob also explained that he could summon absolutely any creature with his item. The cunning wizard then began to summon legendary creatures from myths and legends. Shinobu realized that he was in a very difficult situation, because Gabrielle was the only 6th level creature he could summon at the moment, and if Jacob could summon more than one supreme being, he would certainly win this fight, especially if he summons Lucifer himself. Jacob used 4th level summoning magic to summon 4 great spirits. The spirits were a salamander, an undine, a dwarf, and a sylph. Shinobu looked at the summoned creatures in amazement and began to doubt their effectiveness. He thought that if this was the maximum that Jacob could summon, then there was no fear of losing this battle. These opponents were much better than most other summons, but in the game of La Vida Online, there were a lot of creatures much stronger than these 4 spirits. Therefore, it was unclear why Jacob thought he was a god. Jake posted at this point and decided that the opponent was so scared that he couldn't even utter a single word. The cunning wizard then suggested that Shinobu summon as many creatures as he wanted. Shinobu thought at that moment that Jacob was so stupid that he really thought that the 4 great spirits were the strongest beings. Based on that, it was incomprehensible why people in this game world had become so weak. Shinobu then thought of the numerous organizations that were run by divine people in the shadows. In order for people to become so weak, they had to completely stop pumping their abilities. This only meant that the numerous guilds monopolized all the hunting grounds and dungeons for their own expertise. Now it became absolutely clear why in the past years the game La Vida Online has come to such a decline. After all, the reborn humans had taken over and started doing whatever they wanted. Shinobu said that he had absolutely no time to deal with Jacob, and since he had offered to summon as many creatures as he could, he gladly accepted the generous offer. Jacob saw himself as the victor and his opponent as his slave, and continued to threaten Shinobu with the 4 great spirits, for in his opinion there was nothing stronger than them. Jacob enjoyed his moment of illusory glory and called himself a god capable of any achievement. Shinobu was tired of the foolish wizard's chatter and decided to use summoning magic. To begin with, the guy summoned the divine dragon King Bahamut, who was at the 5th level of summoning. The huge fire-breathing creature shocked the narcissistic Jacob, who instantly lost his confidence and began to tremble. But Shinobu decided that this was not the end of the story and suggested that my opponent prepare for more surprises. The next level 5 creature was the Sea Lord Leviathan, who rendered Jacob speechless. The Thunder Emperor Indra appeared right behind him, followed by the creator of the earth, Gaia. All of these creatures also belonged to the 5th level of summoning, and Jacob couldn't even dream of such a thing. The creatures looked disdainfully at Jacob, who laughed nervously and asked who this Shinobu even was. But the guy had already gotten the hang of it and decided to use the 6th level of summoning. Within seconds, the unrivaled Seraphim Gabrielle appeared, could destroy all those creatures very easily even though they were numerous. The mythical girl with angel wings immediately embraced her master and was ready to do his every command. Then Shinobu, enjoying Jacob's fear, asked him if there was anything else he could brag about. But Jacob was so shocked by the sight of the horrible monsters that he lost the ability to speak. Shinobu enjoyed his superiority over his foolish opponent, and Jacob saw magical creatures of the 6th summoning level for the first time in his life. Shinobu admitted that he had missed Gabrielle, and the girl replied that she was honored to serve her beloved master again. All this was against a backdrop of terrifying magical creatures that proved Shinobu's wonderful abilities. Jacob couldn't accept his defeat and couldn't believe that Shinobu's summoning could be above level 4. He had never heard of such monsters. Jacob then shouted that he was a great genius and was about to show all his abilities. The cocky wizard ordered his creatures to destroy Shinobu immediately, and to do so in the most brutal way possible. Gabrielle was the first to repel the attack on her master and dealt a fatal blow to the enemy with a powerful blow. Immediately afterward, the other magical creatures summoned by Shinobu showed their incredible power by destroying the 4 spirits. Jacob was terrified, for his summoned spirits could not stand up to their opponents. But the wizard still believed that he was the king and god who could not lose. Jacob decided to summon his destroyed spirits again, but Shinobu ordered Gabrielle to prevent him from doing so. The mystical girl instantly began to do her master's bidding. In a split second, Gabrielle was at Jacob's side and smashed his precious donated item with one precise blow. The act caused panic and fear, and he watched doomedly as his main treasure shattered into thousands of small shards. Jake doomedly fell to his knees and tried to reassemble what could never be whole again. Somewhere was the item he was most proud of in his life. Finally growling, he declared that he recognized the superiority of the celestial sage. After all, he was a divine man, after all could indeed possess unrivaled magical abilities. Shinobu was pleased with the result of the battle, but asked him not to compare him to those who already have the maximum level from the beginning of the game. The guy explained to the stupid wizard that he started his journey from the first level, and to get to what he has now he had to die many times and suffer unbearable pain. But this only made Jacob laugh, as he didn't believe a word his opponent said, and then screamed in fear as 4 spirits appeared before him. Shinobu decided that these 4 great beings were too angry with their former master. Meanwhile, Jacob crawled backwards and didn't understand why the 4 great spirits were not obeying his will, since he had completely controlled them before. As it turned out, these mystical beings had been forcibly summoned by Jacob with the Alexandrite stone, and now that the powerful object was gone, the 4 great spirits no longer considered Jacob their master. One of the creatures, called a gnome, came as close as possible to his former master, and Jacob backed away in fear, falling into an endless abyss. Shinobu decided that this was a fitting end for a man as vile as Jacob, for he had done everything he could to die today. Shinobu then activated the space change and returned to the normal game world. The next day, the whole town was excited and frightened by the brutal murder of a squad of soldiers, as well as the disappearance of Guildmaster Jacob. Shinobu was surprised to read the city news, as Jacob had been a good man, judging from what had been written. But in the end, the murder of the soldiers was attributed to Jacob and explained by the fact that he had gone insane trying to reach the 3rd level of spellcasting. The only surviving witness confirmed Jacob's guilt, and everyone assumed that the mad wizard had simply left town. Shinobu didn't know what to do now, because he had changed the memories of everyone in the town through memory management, and it was very hard. Shinobu felt very tired and wanted to rest at least a little, and after that continue his journey to the intended goal. Leslie was happy to see Aaron and Kaylee, as they really loved themselves and tried to take care of each other. Shinobu realized that if he had made a mistake on even one person, the consequences could have been horrifying. For one must not forget that human malice knows no bounds. But despite all these events, the guy did not forget that he needed to move forward, because he must become even stronger. Raising his level was a priority, and he had to get items from the Adventurers Guild. After all, Shinobu needed to visit a dungeon that only he could enter. Shinobu realized how much this world had been reduced to a pathetic state by those who considered themselves heavenly men. Therefore, the next step in protecting his sister would be an important decision. Shinobu offered Gabrielle to go with him, and the girl of course promised to follow her master even to the underworld, for it is the most important task in life for her. Meanwhile, the cruel man in the white hat mocked the young cat girl and asked how much she hated him. The young girl sobbed and promised to kill the vile man. This is exactly what the man in the white suit wanted, because he used the hatred of other creatures to become even stronger, and that's why he was always hunting for victims like this defenseless girl. The monster in the white suit dreamed of reaching level 99 as quickly as possible and overcoming the limit of his abilities. The man in the white bloodstained suit enjoyed the moment of his power, and promised that he would definitely kill all the reborn humans. Shinobu kept thinking about killing Jacob and realized that he still wasn't very used to killing, and it made him uncomfortable. But Gabrielle explained that Jacob had been hostile himself, so killing him was the only right way out of that situation, and he shouldn't blame himself for other people's mistakes. Shinobu realized that the girl was right and remembered that her story was very interesting. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, Gabrielle was an ordinary maid, but recognized her master as a god and swore to serve him forever. Because of her devotion, Gabrielle is ready to turn into a ruthless killing machine at any second just by one order of her master. Shinobu decided to ask the girl beforehand not to kill people too frivolously. Gabrielle agreed, but then reminded him that their enemy was a foreigner, so she destroyed him without remorse. Such cruelty frightened Shinobu, for he knew what this lovely beauty was capable of. The guy asked not to use any killing and no torture unless he ordered it. Gabrielle promised to follow this rule, for to her the will of her master is the most important law in life. Shinobu explained to the girl that she exaggerated too much, and sometimes he felt that if he asked her to kill herself, Gabrielle would gladly do it. The girl instantly showed her determination and made a gruesome cut on her beautiful body. She then declared that she would do anything for Shinobu. Gabrielle explained that she had just crushed her heart, but it wasn't enough and now needed to wait a bit until she ran out of strength. Shinobu demanded that she immediately stop taking everything literally, and ordered her to use healing magic immediately. Obediently, she obeyed her master's orders and began to restore her seductive body. Shinobu was shocked by such devotion of the girl and realized that he should be more careful in expressing his desires. Gabrielle explained that she could do anything from preparing food to fighting horrible monsters, and all she needed to do was to receive an order. Then the magical beauty offered to take care of her master even at night, and it caused surprise and then genuine embarrassment to Shinobu, because he certainly did not expect such a thing. But suddenly a system message warned that such actions were impossible, and that upset Gabrielle. The girl of course knew that this game is for all ages, but unfortunately Mr. Shinobu was only 17 years old, could not take care of him at night and give him incredible pleasure. Shinobu immediately relaxed, for now he wouldn't have to fend off the harassment of the mythical creature. And Gabrielle was of course saddened, for she sincerely wished to be much closer to her master. Then the guy started thinking about the fact that he had gotten some pretty valuable information from Jacob, and now he knew about the existence of other players and had seen a detailed map of this world. The only thing he needed to do now was to increase his strength to its maximum. Gabrielle was surprised and asked that the master didn't have enough summoned creatures. Shinobu explained that of course all summoned creatures are his power, it doesn't matter how many creatures he summons. After all, if the opponents attacked with a large group of 99th level players, they would of course lose in this unequal battle. And if Jacob was telling the truth, then all the guilds would unite and then divide all the lands between the groups and effectively own them, thus trying to keep the balance among themselves. But Shinobu decided that this situation couldn't last long, and who would still want to be the first among equals. Now with the new game update and the new level limit, things will be different. This precarious balance is bound to collapse, and when it does, a horrible and large-scale war will start, which will cause many casualties. Shinobu decided that in this case everything is getting more complicated and he needs to get stronger faster. After all, the new game update will launch right after Megumi moves into this game world, and there are only 10 game months left until then. Gabrielle asked the guy how he was going to get stronger. Shinobu explained that first of all, they need to hide from other players as before, because he is the only one who can use the new game update. That's why they need to hurry up and try to pump up quickly to be one step ahead of everyone else. But the problem is that it is not effective to do this alone. Gabrielle suggested teaming up with someone in that case, and Shinobu approved of the suggestion. Shinobu decided that it would be a good idea to get acquainted with the people of La Vida. Gabrielle was surprised at such a decision by her host and warned that perhaps such residents would be too weak. Shinobu agreed, but also reminded her that there must be some explanation as to why they were all so weak. Jacob was a strong enough character, but he was ignorant of many things in this world and didn't even know that demons existed. Shinobu suggested that in the last 100 years, the players have had their hands in all this, because they destroyed all the information about important processes and took away their hunting grounds from the locals. And that's why they can't get a single level, because it is forbidden to kill anyone. Therefore, the inhabitants of this world are not weak, as they were simply forced to be so. And so there must be at least one uncut diamond among the locals, which would be useful to find and make it shine. And when they find such a talented person, they should make him their apprentice and maximize his strength and abilities. Then as morning came, Shinobu announced that it was time for them to depart. But Gabrielle inquired as to how they would be traveling. Shinobu explained that they should use any stealthy paths where there was little chance of encountering players. Soon they managed to get to the city quite safely, and after a while they found themselves at the slave market. That being said, Shinobu of course realized that it was better not to show his face in the central square, even though he didn't like it. Why the guy paid attention to one of the slave girls, who turned out to be much smaller and prettier than he thought. because this girl was a representative of the race of beastmen. Gabrielle reminded him that slaves are just a commodity. If the master wants to buy one or more of them, he should first of all look at the quality of the goods. The slave for sale was too beautiful and was only suitable as a sex slave. Shinobu felt disgusted. Apparently it was disgusting to watch someone selling living beings like a snack at the market. The guy then asked Gabrielle to see if anyone among the slaves was suitable for apprentice status. Gabrielle was surprised that she was the one who needed to make this important choice, but Shinobu explained that he just wanted to hear an opinion that might be different from his. Gabrielle explained that if her personal preferences and hobbies were taken into account, she would gladly offer to take on a 10-year-old boy as an apprentice. Shinobu laughed at such preferences from Gabrielle and asked that did she really like little boys that much. The girl began to justify herself and explained that it was most important for her to serve for his benefit and help in all matters. But if the Lord was a little boy, she would certainly take a keen interest in him. Shinobu ended up thanking Gabrielle for her help and decided to make the choice on his own. After a while, Shinobu found himself in a supply warehouse and heard one of the merchants berating and beating a slave girl. The girl cat was in a terrible state. Her entire body was covered in bruises and her face was swollen with bruises. There was also noticeable extreme exhaustion, which happened due to the diet and conditions of confinement. The merchant was not himself from anger, because this girl was not interesting to the customers at all and annoyed him too much with her presence and uselessness. The merchant once again swung to strike and ordered that she should never again come into his sight. But just at that moment, Shinobu intervened and blocked the merchant's arm. The man was shocked by the stranger's sudden appearance and asked who he was. The guy smiled amiably and called himself an ordinary customer who was lost in the nooks and crannies of the market square. The merchant calmed down a bit and explained that customers were not allowed in this room and so the guy should leave as soon as possible. Shinobu became interested in the beaten girl who looked more like a child. The merchant immediately explained that she wasn't for sale, though she used to be listed as merchandise, but then planned her escape. Shinobu inquired as to why this girl was not for sale at the moment. The merchant demonstrated the girl's slave status and explained that with her stats and condition, it would be very difficult to find a buyer for her. Shinobu pointed out that this girl had too many negative statuses and asked how that could even happen. The merchant talked about how this girl was like this from the beginning and he was unable to fix the situation. Also, this unstable slave girl clawed furiously at the customer, lightly and rudely. But now the girl's condition is deteriorating and she is currently no stronger than an ordinary insect. This whole story interested Shinobu, because he felt that in this weak female body lurks something precious that requires special attention and care. After examining the girl, Shinobu decided that she was in great pain and might even be dying. But still, in the eyes of this child you can see a strong will, which makes people not to give up in difficult situations. The boy decided that this girl is very similar to him and he feels something related. Shinobu remembered how he had died many times, but never once wanted to give up. Besides, this little slave girl was about the same age as his sister Megumi, that horrible moment when their parents died. And as a result, Shinobu had declared to the merchant that he wanted to buy this scarred child immediately. The little slave girl's name was Alice and she was only 15 years old. Alice was from a family of beastmen who lived in a settlement in the great forest of Skaksak. Alice's parents were the guardians that united the entire settlement. In simple words, the girl was born into a family of battle mages of the border region. Alice's parents were really excellent wizards and naturally she also had great expectations. Especially in this settlement, it was natural for a child to meet the expectations of her parents. That is why at the age of 14 Alice left her native settlement to be trained at the Imperial Magical Academy. But as it turned out in the Lyrian Empire, beastmen were a bit discredited and behind their backs they were called stupid hillbillies who were not capable of anything. But Alice had always favored the countryside over the city and so she took such discussions as a compliment. Alice thought that she had a good school life and had many friends around her. But it lasted like that until one day when everything changed. That day was the rite of passage to become a wizard. According to the rules at the age of 15, when the student's soul is not yet so developed, one must make a contract with the spirits. There were 4 spirit gods and with their help pupils could use magic. And so as a wizard it was mandatory to make a contract with them. Alice had been preparing for this all her life and so she strived for perfection. But on that day, the 4 spirit gods did not help Alice and she was completely rejected. After that shameful day, it was as if Alice was branded and it became a real test. But as it turned out, this was not the worst thing the young girl had to face. The subsequent training turned into a real hell, where Alice was constantly mocked and bullied. But Alice continued to endure all the difficulties, although she felt like a complete failure. One of the days, which were similar to each other, the cup of patience overflowed over the edge. Alice could not endure the insult and responded to the hurtful words with the strongest slap. It was the first time Alice felt incredible anger and slapped her abuser. Alice did not pay attention when only she was insulted, but when her relatives were affected, it caused a chain reaction in the girl's mind and she could no longer contain her emotions. Alice knew that her family worked hard to pay for her education and send her to a magical academy, and so Alice could not allow or forgive anyone to mock her family and friends. Thus Alice crossed a line that she had not broken before. But as a result of this event, the bullying got worse and worse and Alice could no longer tolerate this attitude from other students. Before this vacation, Alice was called to the dean's office and told to take a vacation. The girl gave a variety of reasons, but in the end Alice had to return to her hometown and write an application for expulsion. The girl of course realized that the dean's office wanted to do just that. After these unpleasant events, Alice decided to return to her native village, because to stay in the city was no longer meaningful. On the way back to the village, Alice thought about what they would think her relatives and acquaintances, because she could not become a wizard. The girl decided that her parents, friends, as well as kind uncles and aunts in the neighborhood would probably look a little disappointed, but still she would be received warmly and cordially. Realizing all this made Alice feel even more painful, so the girl decided to apologize first, and then work hard to forget everything she had encountered in the city. Alice decided that even if she couldn't use magic, she would still be a guardian of the forest. But when the girl returned to her home, she was greeted by horrible fire and smoke where her home settlement had been. There were horrifying pictures of dead bodies everywhere, and the metallic odor of blood and burning flesh hung in the air. Alice immediately rushed to find her mom and dad, but it was very difficult. After a while, Alice was still able to find the bodies of her parents and it shocked her. The girl immediately remembered the past, when all these people were happy and alive. Just at that moment appeared a mysterious man in a white suit, which reeked of eerie cold and death. The smiling village destroyer used a 5th level magic spell called Catastrophe. Alice felt a powerful blow because of a few seconds flew far away to the side. The girl was very painful and hot, and she did not understand what was happening around her. Instantly Alice began to be affected by petrification, curse, poison, confusion, demonic seal, paralysis, madness, infection, and weakness. The mysterious man explained to the girl that he had put many bad statuses on her, but was surprised because she was still alive. Alice at this moment thought only about her parents who were in the village, but the nasty man explained that he killed all the villagers and now Alice can hate him for that. Why the man in the white suit admitted that he could have easily killed this whole village, because he has incredible power that has no equal. The stranger called Alice very weak, and so she doesn't need to understand at all what is going on here, and she should only hate the man who killed her parents, because he really needs it. Then the murderer in white explained to Alice that he was going to sell her at the slave market, and she would be a miserable slave for the rest of her life, and that should be another seed of hatred that he is going to sow in the girl's young body. And even if Alice gets rid of the negative statuses, then in the end the best thing for her in life will be the fate of a sex slave. Therefore, Alice will hate him very much and will end up fighting to get out of this state. And after that, the girl will appear before him not just as a pathetic meat sack, but already as an experienced meat sack. Of course, this would only happen if Alice could survive and overcome her suffering. The girl hissed back that she would never forgive the killer of her parents, asked the man in white to tell her name. The killer in white replied that only Alice should decide whether to die or live, but he always likes various exotic souvenirs like her. And about the name, he gave up such nonsense a long time ago and doesn't want to call himself anything, though some people prefer to call him God Killer and he likes it sometimes. That sounds much better, because it's the name of the man who will eventually massacre all the revived humans. Alice has promised to kill the vile maniac. And the killer in white praised the girl for her strong spirit, and so he hopes that in the future she will become a high-level warrior, and one day stand before him. Right now, however, Alice saw a strange man in black who was going to buy her from a cruel merchant. The merchant offered Shinobu to take the girl for free, because she was too much of a loss and he had wanted to get rid of her for a long time. And apparently it would be better to give her to the man than to just kill her as unwanted goods. Alice saw how the stranger in black saw a lot of bad skills in her and irritatedly said something quietly. But she could not hear these words because she was too weak. Meanwhile, Shinobu asked Gabrielle how many seconds it would take her to use level 5 healing magic. The mythical girl asked for only 3 seconds and promised to solve all problems with negative statuses. Gabrielle enveloped the exhausted Alice with a soft, warm light and applied the blessing of the angels. Gradually, the girl began to feel the power in her body, and her heavy shackles dissolved under the influence of the angel's blessing. Alice could not believe what was happening and decided that since there was a real angel beside her, she was already dead. But Shinobu hurriedly explained to Alice that she was actually fine and alive and should come to her senses as soon as possible. The guy then explained to Alice that they would now go to a safe place together and then she could go wherever she wanted. Shinobu explained to the girl that he was actually looking for an apprentice, and if Alice had the desire to become stronger, he was willing to help her with that. Shinobu promised Alice that he would give her a helping hand if she wanted to go with him and start a new life with a clean slate. Alice looked at the man who offered to help her for the first time in her life with disbelief. After all other people had only mocked and humiliated her. But there was something appealing in the eyes of this mysterious stranger, and Alice took Shinobu's hand, accepting his offer. Shinobu decided to wait outside while Gabrielle took care of Alice and tried to get her cleaned up. Gabrielle promised to do as the Lord wished and decided to start with the bathroom. Alice was suspicious of everything and thought she had been bought as a slave. But then the young girl remembered how her parents' killer had prophesied her fate as a sex slave, and it scared Alyssa. Gabrielle explained to Alice that first she needed to have a good bath and then try on the new clothes that Mr. Shinobu had prepared. Alice noticed that the poison and all the negative statuses were gone and even smoothed out her childhood scars. The girl thanked Gabrielle for the angelic blessing that restored her body. Gabrielle told of how Shinobu asked how many seconds she could heal Alice in, and since she promised to do it in 3 seconds, then she was obligated to heal the girl much faster than she promised. Gabrielle also explained that if Alice wanted to thank her, she had to ask Shinobu's permission first. Alice didn't understand all the intricacies of the relationship between Gabrielle and her master. She just thanked her for helping and saving her. Gabrielle replied that it was just Shinobu's orders, and so she complied. After about an hour, Alice finished her bath and put on a new red dress, and after that Shinobu joined the girls and assessed the young slave girl's appearance. Alice once again remembered the words of the monster who killed her parents about her fate as a sex slave. Alice was surprised at the huge amount of food on the table, as she had never tasted most of the dishes. Shinobu noticed the girl's embarrassment and asked what was bothering her, and maybe there was something she didn't eat as well. Alice reminded that she was still a slave and didn't know if he could even be in the same room with his master. Shinobu thought that he had managed to cure all the negative statuses from Alice, but unfortunately her slave crest still remained, and so it needed to be cancelled. Shinobu asked Gabrielle to solve this problem, but the angelic girl explained that these details were beyond her control and she didn't know what to do with this crest. Gabrielle then decided to immediately follow her master's orders and explained that she had left the slave crest unrecognized earlier. Within seconds, the slave crest was gone and Alice could consider herself free. The crest shattered into many shards, but Alice recalled that the slave's crest was a lost magic from a century ago. Shinobu decided that he could open it, but it still wasn't an oath or blood seal or anything like that. The guy stated that Alice was no longer a slave, and so she could eat whatever she wanted from this table and also had to get rid of the feeling of being a slave. Alice noticed that Shinobu has a huge talent for magic, which means he can do a lot of things, and so she doesn't understand why he bought her from the merchant as a slave in the first place. But the guy reminded her that he had already spoken of his true purpose, and so Alice could not worry about her future fate. Shinobu explained that what he really needed was a strong companion, and that's why he was looking for a capable apprentice, and he didn't buy Alice to make her a slave. Alice apologized for her words and explained that she had agreed to any conditions in order to save her life, and therefore she did not deserve to be the apprentice of such a powerful man. Alice then admitted that she couldn't be strong because she turned out to be incompetent during the Magic Academy exam and wouldn't be able to live up to Shinobu's expectations. These words made the guy after dinner go far out of town with the girls and find a suitable place for his scheme. Alice didn't understand why they were here at night and asked that if they would really set off now. But Shinobu explained that they were only going back to his hidden base because he didn't want people to see his powerful magic. After these words, the guy used a 3rd level flight spell and caused a genuine surprise to Alice, who did not expect them to fly at all. Shinobu advised the girl to close her eyes if she was afraid of heights, because it would be much easier to endure the flight. After Shinobu was at a sufficient height, he used a spell of the 4th level of negation of gravity, and Alice was now free to float without fear of falling down. The young girl was fascinated by the night landscape that stretched all the way to the horizon, and everything below seemed very small and unnatural. Alice watched the clouds below her feet with interest. Shinobu asked how scary she was, but Alice replied that she was completely unshaven and everything below looked very beautiful. Alice also marveled at Shinobu's powerful magical abilities and asked if he was really not a man but a god. The guy laughed at such a silly question and then explained that there are indeed people who call themselves deities, but he himself is just an ordinary man. Gabrielle had her own point of view and considered her master a god, at least to her. Alice also disagreed and explained that a person who could handle level 4 magic so easily couldn't be an ordinary person. And why in that case would Shinobu take a completely talentless girl as his apprentice? Shinobu looked thoughtfully into the distance and decided to tell Alice something interesting and new. The guy asked Alice if she knew that the world was round. This caused a real surprise to the girl, because she thought the whole world around her was flat, just as it was drawn on the map. Shinobu advised her to look into the distance and see for herself. Alice noticed how the earth was rounded far away on the horizon, and it was a real discovery for the girl. Then Shinobu explained that all people see only clouds in the sky, but few people realize that behind the clouds in the sky there is impenetrable darkness. And there are many more things in this world that few people can see unless they change their perspective right now. That is what Alice must do to expand her consciousness and understanding of this world. So if Alice thinks she is incompetent, it just means that there is a lot she doesn't know in this world. And if she wants to change that, she has to work hard. Especially she herself cannot be sure that she is incompetent, because she has been told this by other people who may have wanted to indoctrinate her. Therefore, if Alice is surprised by such an event every time, she will not be able to cope with it. And so it would be necessary to wait until the next time, when she would be much better able to perceive the world around her and all the processes taking place. Alice rejoiced. She really felt how nice it was to learn something new and agreed to recognize this world, because it's wonderful to be surprised by something. Shinobu remembered how easy it was in this game to go there with just one command and use the 5th level Excalibur spell. The huge sword in Shinobu's hands caused Alice to genuinely admire it, but the girl began to shout that now she was no longer surprised by anything and was willing to accept any information, even the most unbelievable. Shinobu explained to the girl that if she were to be surprised very much by every magical manifestation, she would eventually be unable to cope with her emotions, and so and again she would have to wait until the next time to understand all the events. Shinobu then demonstrated his heavenly castle Isekai'd, which he used as his base, and it was also his home where he could hide from prying eyes and be safe. Alice was shocked, for she had never seen anything like it. The castle was so big that Alice couldn't believe how it could even stay up in the air, and even screamed with delight. The Isekai'd Heavenly Palace was the exact base where all of Shinobu's summoned servants lived. Gabrielle asked her master what he would do next and if he had any errands for her. Gabrielle then reminded about the level 6 survivors and asked if Shinobu wanted to meet them. But the guy, after thinking for a bit, replied that it wasn't that important and it could wait. The first thing Shinobu decided to do was to train Alice, because she was still on the 1st level, and it was hard to predict when this young girl would move to the next level of her development. Alice didn't understand what kind of training she was going to do and started to worry, why she asked what Shinobu wanted to do with her. And Shinobu remembered that first Alice must sign a contract, and after that they will train hard. The girl had no idea what kind of contract they were talking about. Shinobu knew that Alice was unable to sign a contract with any of the 4 great spirits and remained an outcast among the students of the Magic Academy. The girl explained that she didn't turn out to have any talent, and that was why she failed the crucial exam, was not forced to leave the Magic Academy. But Shinobu explained that all the problems were not due to lack of talent, and one shouldn't consider the failure to sign the contract as their biggest tragedy, and shouldn't call themselves incompetent. Shinobu asked Alice if she could explain the level system in detail in her own words. The girl thought for a bit and promised to try to tell it. Alice explained that when someone takes the life force of a human, monster, or any other defeated object, their soul level increases, and that level is a numerical expression of the soul rank. Shinobu then asked for an explanation of the phenomenon known as status growth. Alice stated that it could all be described as an increase in physical abilities and other such parameters that are spiritually promoted to strengthen the soul as the level increases. Alice explained that she was unable to make a pact with the 4 major spirits, so she has no growth compensations from those blessings. And even if her level increased, the increase in her status would be too small and there wouldn't be any significant growth in the end. Shinobu listened to the girl's story carefully and agreed that her whole story led to a very difficult situation. The guy then explained to Alice that his main profession was actually a summoner, and he was just an ordinary person. But Alice did not understand how this was possible, because Shinobu uses divine abilities of the 5th level, and even higher than this level. Shinobu promised to definitely help Alice become strong, and it's very good that he himself didn't make a pact with spirits before. Now Alice must forget absolutely everything she was taught before, and Alice must realize that she can destroy the habitual way of thinking of this world, and only in this way she will be able to get rid of past failures. Shinobu demonstrated the possibilities of summoning magic and showed the girl several creatures that could fight for their master. Alice was delighted and decided that these were the very gods she had heard about. The summoned beings asked the girl if she really wanted to make a contract with them. Alice felt the overwhelming power and could not believe that Shinobu could control such powerful beings. After all, she truly believed in the divine manifestation of such magic. Meanwhile, the magical monsters claimed that their blessing was powerful, but the vessel inside Alice was too small, so she must answer the question and decide for herself if she wanted to make a pact with them. Alice's mind was very full of thoughts. After all, the girl realized that she could not make a pact even with the 4 great spirits, and she was very curious if she could make a pact with such great gods. At the same time, if she could not do it, it would be the final confirmation of her incompetence. In the end, Alice decided that she had no choice but to move on and try to change her life. The young girl exclaimed her agreement to make a pact with the creepy creatures, and one of the monsters praised Alice for her determination. In front of Alice were the Dragon God Emperor Bahamut, the Sea Emperor Leviathan, the Thunder Emperor Indra, and the Earth Mother Goddess Gaia. The great magical beings asked the girl if she had any qualities that truly deserved their blessing. The beings eventually promised to make a pact with Alice if she was willing to take on such a responsibility. After a few seconds, Alice felt herself in a completely different space where she felt very hot, and it felt like something huge and powerful was being injected into her body. It seemed to Alice that her body was being torn apart and it was unbearable, but somehow the girl could not affect it. Gabrielle began to worry about Alice, and she asked Shinobu if she was going to be alright. The guy was surprised by Gabrielle's worries, but the mythical girl explained that she wasn't worried about what exactly was going on, but just had some doubts about the rightness of these actions. After all, if Alice herself could not make a pact with the 4 great spirits, then why would Shinobu then recommend that this girl make a pact with Bahamut and other powerful beings that were much higher in stature? Shinobu advised to look at this situation more carefully. After all, one must realize that Alice was unable to make a pact with the 4 great spirits that absolutely every student of a magical academy must make a pact with. And it wasn't really because Alice was incompetent. Shinobu then talked about how the reincarnated people manipulated the inhabitants of this world with wrong information. That's why the locals can only contract with the 4 great spirits, but one must realize that there are exceptions to everything. After all, the best of the best are born by divine design. Sometimes it will look like an incompetent person going off the beaten path. And to put it simply, no one usually makes a pact with such powerful entities. So whether you're human or spirit, it's always the same. Gabrielle gradually began to realize that Alice was a very promising and strong being who only needed to be guided in the right direction. Meanwhile, Alice herself did not understand what was happening to her, and even thought that perhaps she had already died. You began to remember her dead relatives, as well as all the close people who once lived in her native village, and said that she cannot die. After all, she doesn't want to die, and she shouldn't do it without fulfilling her main purpose in life. With courage and determination, Alice declared that she could not die until she had killed the man responsible for the death of her family and the destruction of her village. Alice demanded that she be given the power to take revenge on the murderer in white, as this was the only way she could get justice and peace. Shinobu, watching everything that was going on, was satisfied with the current result. Alice, meanwhile, was trying to get as close as possible to the magic light to gain power and receive the divine blessing. The girl desperately wanted to gain divine power and become a punishing blade for her parents' murderer. Shinobu realized at this moment that he wasn't wrong about Alice, and she was indeed as talented as the gods themselves. After a very bright flash, the girl returned to normal reality again, but kept looking at her hands, which still managed to touch the magical light. Shinobu praised the girl for her determination and explained that she was now able to make a contract with the divine beings and should stop thinking of herself as incompetent. The feelings overwhelmed Alice, and the girl hugged the man who gave her hope for a new life and then thanked the guy for his help. Shinobu was happy to get such a talented student, and judging from Alice's updated status, she was able to make a magical pact with all the creatures of the 5th level and in addition received a bonus contract. Everything that had happened was so amazing that Alice couldn't stand on her feet anymore and admitted that she just wanted to take a dip in the warm water and relax. But Shinobu reminded the girl that her training had just begun and now was not the time to just sit around and idle. Alice was surprised by this reaction from Shinobu and realized that her new life was just beginning. The guy explained that it was time for Alice to raise her levels, because her magical transformation was just beginning and she still had a very long and difficult road ahead of her. Alice asked a little chagrined that it was really that necessary. Shinobu reminded the girl that the contract had been made and so she just needed to think about raising her levels. Alice agreed with her teacher, but admitted that she was too tired and sweaty during the contract. All these arguments seemed silly and Shinobu suggested to be patient and listen to his instructions. The guy explained that of course he understood how tired Alice was, but now she needed to concentrate, because if she made a mistake, she would be very hurt. Shinobu then asked his young student if she had ever had to use magic before. The girl admitted that her magical experience only consisted of using first-level life magic. Shinobu promised to take care of the magic control in that case and advised the girl not to worry. The guy then explained that right now he was channeling his magic power into the staff through Alice and then he was going to release the magic. But the girl should not move. Alice felt the effects of the magical energy and looked intently at the staff, but Shinobu asked her to look up where the main target was. Unexpectedly for the young girl, a real dragon appeared in the sky, which was a disaster-class monster. Shinobu promised that now they could defeat this monster together using magic. Alice was surprised, because she was absolutely sure that such a monster could only be defeated with the cooperation of the Imperial Guard and Knights, and it was almost impossible to do it alone. But Shinobu advised her to trust him and calm down, for together they would be able to accomplish any impossible things. Shinobu asked Alice to concentrate and let the energy flow through her. Alice was afraid and worried about the outcome, but still did her best to follow Shinobu's orders. After a few minutes, Shinobu sensed the right moment and decided to use the 5th level of flame magic and increase the flow of his magical energy. Fire Shakyamuni quickly caught up with his target and caused the huge dragon to roar wildly in terrible pain. The terrifying dragon began to fall to the ground, burning to the ground along the way. Alice was surprised that such a huge monster was destroyed with a single blow. Then the girl asked what all this meant since she was only holding the staff with her hands and not using any of her efforts. Shinobu realized that the girl couldn't see her status and explained that at the moment she had raised her level to level 5 and all her stats had increased as well. Alice stated that she too had a special status plate that she had made for herself while entering the Magic Academy. The girl looked closely at her new status and was pleasantly surprised. Alice didn't immediately believe that her new level had reached the 5th and decided that there was probably something wrong with the numbers, since she was at the 1st level. Shinobu explained to your student that she is about 2 or 3 times more capable than the current inhabitants of the game La Vida Online. And every time Alice raises her level, then she would receive compensation, so from now on, the numbers from Alice would be even higher. But at the same time, the girl could not understand how she was able to so elevate her level, because it was Shinobu who defeated the terrible dragon. The guy demonstrated the magical item and explained that everything happened thanks to it. This special friendship necklace allowed to divide the experience gained by the team and distribute it equally among all participants, although there was a limit on the level of promotion for such actions. The experience gained by high-level players equipped with this item would be shared among the low-level team members. As a result, players can easily level up, gaining a large amount of experience without participating in battle. This item allows for what is known as leveling up between team members. This friendship necklace was the perfect magic item for playing together with your friends and belonged to the class of special magic items. In fact, there was nothing complicated about all of this and just needed to give the players the necessary items as well as the right advice and in the end just look out for them. Starting from level 1, Alice would now grow steadily and eventually become useful to Shinobu, helping him with his most important goal. Alice was thrilled with everything that was happening and explained that she didn't really know much about magic, but she understood that Shinobu had done everything he could for her and so she was grateful for his help. The girl was incredibly happy for the first time in a long time and remembered what positive emotions were. Shinobu was also happy that he finally got a talented student and saved another good creature. Suddenly another girl appeared, who was surprised by the appearance of a stranger cat, because when she went to bed she wasn't there. Alice was delighted by the beauty of this girl, who had been watching what was happening in the castle courtyard for some time. Tsukayami appreciated Alice's beautiful body and examined the cat girl closely with interest. Such a stare from the stranger made Alice blush and feel embarrassed, because she felt like a target for Tsukayami. Tsukayami then asked for some attention too, and even a hug, for she really liked to be near her master Shinobu. This made Alice feel dizzy at all, for the stranger was strangely tempting. But Shinobu ignored the girl's request, and Tsukayomi decided that here I have nothing more to do, because all these age restrictions unfortunately apply to Shinobu. Alice meanwhile was puzzled as to who this mysterious girl really was, for if she was really Shinobu's partner, it could be dangerous for her to be too close to her teacher. But Tsukayomi was just like Gabrielle, a level 6 summon creature. Shinobu praised Tsukayomi for her timely appearance, for he just had an important errand to run. The seductive girl promised to do anything if her master wished it. But Shinobu explained that he was going to give Alice Tsukayomi's amulet and she should understand what that meant. Tsukayomi replied that as far as she knew, it would be her responsibility to watch over Alice from the shadows in the future. Tsukayomi took another close look at Alice and asked if this girl was really that important to the master. Shinobu explained that as of today, Alice was his apprentice and as such she must be under his protection. Tsukayomi explained after thinking for a bit that she certainly didn't mind protecting this young girl, but she still had some doubts and questions. Tsukayomi asked her to explain in more detail what this was really, an order from the master or still a friendly request. The guy, trying not to be tempted, replied that it was all fashionable to understand it as a request. After all, it was quite normal. Tsukayomi once again reminded her master that he was a very mysterious man. After all, this castle was full of beauties, and Shinobu still hadn't done anything to anyone himself or allowed anyone to do anything nice to him, though Shinobu could rightfully enjoy his high position and enjoy the beautiful girls. The guy explained that he wasn't going to do anything to them at all because of sympathy, loyalty, or anything like that, because he had the most important goal, and he had to follow through with it. Though of course Shinobu noticed the strange behavior of many girls. Shinobu decided to make loyalty equate to sympathy for female summoned characters. Eventually Tsukayomi confessed her sympathy, and promised to be sure to do Shinobu a favor. I would be sure to give Alice the special amulet that underlies it. Alice was thrilled to meet Tsukayomi and called her an amazing woman. Shinobu was pleased with the result and explained that she was done with their training today. The girl rejoiced, for she was indeed very tired and wanted to rest as soon as possible. Shinobu praised his apprentice for doing a great job with her summoning contract and status leveling. Alice wondered what training awaited her tomorrow, for now she would look forward to learning more. This time Shinobu turned to Gabrielle for help. The mythical girl instantly appeared by his side and was ready to do any order of her master. Shinobu explained to Alice that she would have a practice battle with Gabrielle tomorrow. This caused horror in Alice's eyes, for she didn't understand at all how she could fight such a powerful woman. But the guy reminded her of the importance of training, for it was necessary to always keep her body in top condition. Shinobu had already realized that the people of this world couldn't just level up by learning skills and do it like real players. Shinobu then asked his student if she was ready for a new challenge. But this time, Alice was able to handle her emotions and promised to overcome the challenges and become stronger. This made the guy smile and he called Alice a real heroine. But at the same time, Alice was very worried about the battle with the Archangel girl, because Gabrielle was incredibly strong and at the same time skillfully wielded a spear. Gabrielle in turn promised to destroy all of her master's enemies and deliver them the most elaborate torments. Shinobu realized that these words were said at a very bad time, because Alice was even more frightened of meeting this girl in a training battle. But then the guy said that still the training fight should take place. Especially in this castle there are many different well-summoned creatures under his command, and all of them will be mentors for Alice. The guy then asked Alice to do her best to surprise him. The girl accepted this challenge and promised to try her best not to embarrass herself during the training battle. The main entrance to Shinobu Castle was guarded by a knight in black armor, which looked quite menacing thanks to his huge blade. It was not the first time Alice had seen this silent and lonely guard and finally decided to say hello to him during her morning run. But the stern guard looked at the girl without answering her. At breakfast, Shibuto was very surprised, for he didn't expect to be able to eat curry in this world. Alice explained that it was a dish similar to the cuisine of her native tribe, so she prepared it just as Mr. Shinobu had asked. The guy apologized for asking the girl to cook for him, since she was probably tired during her morning run. But Alice explained that it wasn't that at all and wondered why the rest of the castle didn't eat anything. One of the girls replied that they get their magical power from their master and so basically they don't need food at all. Shinobu hadn't thought about this before and asked that if they couldn't eat food at all. But the girl explained that this was partly true and they can feel hunger, which basically doesn't bother them. but cooking requires a lot of work, so they don't want to waste time on such a trivial activity. Alice immediately thought of the guard near the main gate, for he never leaves his post and is always on his feet. Shinobu called this mysterious man Black Dog, who was a faithful servant and a reliable protector. The Black Dog agreed to work as an usher of his own accord. He is also called the 1,000-Mile Demon Eye and has powerful abilities. Alice stated that even though the Black Dog is a divine being, he is still in human form, which means he is also hungry. The maids reminded her that this mysterious guardian never leaves the gate, although he does look like a normal human. Alice thought about the problem and decided to take the Black Dog some food for lunch, for she really wanted to know more about him. Shinobu suggested asking the other maids to do it, but Alice decided to do it herself, because in this castle even the most ordinary maids were high-level beings. In the end, Shinobu agreed and allowed Alice to do whatever she wanted. The girl thanked him for the permission and hurried to gather food for the Black Dog. Soon Alice was near the main gate and asked the brooding guard if he wanted some lunch. The girl explained that she had prepared some tasty food and would be glad to thank the guard for his protection. Suddenly, the heavy breathing from the black helmet was replaced with words, and the Black Dog refused to eat. But Alice didn't want to give up so quickly and asked the guard that he couldn't eat. The Black Dog was indignant and Alice was instantly frightened, thinking that she shouldn't have asked such a question. The girl apologized for her persistence and for distracting the guard from his work, and decided that he really did not need food and went back to the castle. But suddenly the Black Dog asked Alice to linger, and it surprised the girl very much. It was noticeable that it was very difficult for the Black Dog to talk, because he rarely talked to anyone at all and he was like a real hermit. The mysterious guardian admitted that he was not used to talking to little girls, because his job as a gatekeeper does not involve idle chatter. The Black Dog explained that he doesn't like to be distracted from his service, and that's why he asks not to talk to him. But if he doesn't like it, it doesn't mean he's not comfortable talking to other people. Alice was fascinated by the man's words and realized that he wasn't as scary as he seemed at first. The Black Dog asked the girl that didn't this all seem funny. Alice explained that she was actually very scared to come here, because the Black Dog looks very strong and dangerous. The Black Dog explained that he used to be in a lot of pain and that's why he decided to be alone, because it's much easier that way. If you are tied up in life with other people, it will be unbearably hard to bear betrayal from people close to you. Alice immediately remembered how she had been hurt and betrayed at the Magic Academy, and realized what the guard was talking about. Alice was glad that the conversation really turned out to be quite normal mysterious man, and then apologized for the disturbance and decided to return to the castle. But the Black Dog was already interested in the food that the girl had brought, because the smell from the basket was incredibly delicious. Alice explained that she had curry, sandwiches, and something else with her. At this point, the Black Dog gave in and offered to have lunch with him. The girl was incredibly surprised when she saw the handsome face of this mysterious guardian. The Black Dog decided to make an exception to the rules and for the first time in his life distracted from his service. Alice watched the guard carefully and said that now she understood, because he takes off his scary helmet when he eats food. The sandwiches were very much to the Black Dog's liking, and he next turned his attention to the flavorful curry, which he immediately decided to try a little. The guardian tasted a few spoonfuls of the wonderful curry and admitted that the dish was too spicy for him. Alice was immediately upset and decided that the guy just doesn't like spicy food and needs to remember that. The girl promised that next time she would make a curry that would not be spicy, and she would be very happy if they meet again and have a nice conversation. Alice also promised that she would not talk to the Black Dog unless it was absolutely necessary, but she would like to greet him when she passed through the main gate, because they should all be friends who live in the same place. But the Black Dog replied that they were not friends, realized that she had made a mistake in talking to this man. After all, it was impolite of her to call someone her friend without recognizing their wishes. But the guard told Alice not to worry, for he didn't mind it at all. The Black Dog explained that in his understanding a friend is a comrade in arms, and he has never been together with Alice on the battlefield and cannot consider her a friend. But he would be glad if such a thing ever happened. And so hopefully Alice will train hard, and one day they'll really be true friends. Then the mysterious guardian promised to talk to the girl again during their next meeting, but only if she cooked the kind of curry he liked. Alice promised to do everything as it should be done and rejoiced at her success. The girl ran away, and the mysterious Black Dog looked after her and called Alice very strange. Shinobu looked out the window and saw Alice returning, thinking that the girl was getting used to his castle. One of the maids asked how well Alice's training was going. but Shinobu replied that there were still some problems that needed to be worked on. After all, in order to become stronger you need to learn more powerful magic, but unfortunately the inhabitants of this world do not learn new magic simply by increasing the level, and therein lies the problem. The maid confirmed her master's words and then explained that in order to acquire magic, one must have enough status to qualify for a certain magic and one must have a special ability that allows one to learn new magic. One also needs a scroll that allows one to use special items that have magic formulas written on them. And so Alice can only handle the first magic she was taught when she entered the school. The item called a scroll doesn't seem to contain anything useful. Shinobu realizes that it's all very complicated, so it's best to ask Gabrielle for help, who might be able to find a solution to the problem. But Gabrielle explained that in order to overcome the restriction to learn new magic spells, Alice would have to go to the Magic Academy again and recover in her studies. Alice of course did not really want to go back to the Magic Academy, but there was not much of a way, and it remained only to mark the uniform. After the girl got ready she went outside. You apologized for the wait. Shinobu was glad that the uniform fit, and now Alice looked like a real student. Now I'm going back to study at the Magic Academy to learn new magic again. But Shinobu realized that it was going to be an ordeal for the girl. In fact, Alice still had her diploma and was returning to her home village to fill out the expulsion papers. But unfortunately Alice had to face a terrible accident that changed her life. Although she never intended to return to the Magic Academy, things turned out differently. Shinobu, understanding his students' emotions, explained that she didn't really need to return to the Magic Academy if she really couldn't bear to accept it, and they would definitely try to find another way to learn magic. But Alice was determined and wanted to make progress and become stronger as soon as possible. So soon she again saw the building of the Magic Academy and the scarlet flag developing above it. On the territory of the academy as always was lively, and sometimes Alice even missed this environment. After all, she had a few good memories on the background of so many bad ones. The girl remembered the hurtful moments and it added to the heaviness of her legs as she walked to the academy. That said, Alice realized that she had to transcend her fear in order to succeed. The students were shocked by Alice's appearance and immediately began to discuss it. One of Beatrice's former friends looked at Alice with surprise, because she did not expect that the girl was alive. Beatrice explained that she had heard rumors about the terrible incident that had happened in Alice's home village. It was very hard to hear about such a thing and it made her cry. But all this was only a mask of compassion, and Beatrice immediately showed her true face. The cruel girl began to laugh at Alice and said that for people like her it is quite a normal fate. Beatrice began to gloat over the destruction of Alice's home village and told how worried everyone was, especially since, judging from the rumors, all the survivors of the destroyed village had become miserable slaves. And also everyone in the academy learned that one surviving cat girl had been sold at the slave market. Alice was shocked by such cruelty and felt anger rising inside her body. Meanwhile, Beatrice began to mock the destroyed village and the dead inhabitants. The evil girl eventually decided that Alice had lost her virginity during the brigands' attack, and after being made a slave she had somehow escaped and rejoined the academy. Beatrice's laughter increased as her sick imagination painted horrible pictures of Alice's torment, and she enjoyed it. Alice meanwhile just looked at Beatrice, trying to restrain her emotions. Then Beatrice asked where Alice was going to go and whether she wanted to apply for reinstatement, because it was a stupid idea. Beatrice continued to pick on Alice, who was just calmly walking away, but this only made the cruel girl angry and she used a small fire magic spell. Beatrice kept laughing and reminded the frightened Alice that today was the day of the entrance test, and if Alice can't pass this exam, she won't be able to take the course next year. And since she won't, she'd better leave right away and not annoy everyone with her presence. Alice would most likely be incompetent again and would be expelled without a chance to return to her studies. Beatrice continued to rejoice, feeling her impunity and superiority, but Alice decided to continue her journey no matter what and started to get up from the ground. Alice stated that she had indeed been sold at the slave market and had indeed almost sold her virginity for next to nothing. Beatrice was delighted and decided that everything in the case was true. Beatrice then asked for more details, for she had heard that slave girls who had lost their virginity lived in a place no better than a pigsty. But Alice answered, so in fact she remained a virgin. For the men who tried to buy her into sexual slavery she scratched and bit. So soon there were no more men who wanted to buy her into sexual slavery. Beatrice was disappointed but still decided it wasn't true and kept laughing. Now Beatrice began to accuse Alice of being so untalented and incompetent that she couldn't even find herself as a sex slave. And this proves once again that uncivilized natives can't help themselves, no matter how far they go. But Alice replied that her new patron had complimented her character, and now she was completely changed, which meant that from now on she would say what she thought and what she wanted about people. Beatrice was furious, for no words could offend Alice, and she demanded that the cat girl shut up immediately. Beatrice again began to call Alice incompetent and stupid, because she could not even make a contract with the great spirits, and therefore she should behave as quietly as possible, and best of all leave the territory of the Magical Academy. But Alice was already tired of hearing insults against her and decided to make Beatrice shut up immediately. The mean girl was surprised when she saw the magic wand in Alice's hands. But the cat girl didn't waste any time and applied first level fire magic, creating a small fire. A bright flash of fire exploded above Beatrice's head, and it scared and surprised the angry girl. At this moment Alice felt real satisfaction and explained that Beatrice's words sounded very offensive, and so she had best shut up for good. Beatrice was shocked by Alice's behavior and decided that she would not allow herself to be insulted in such a way. So she would definitely report the situation to her father and get Alice expelled from the Magical Academy so that she would never be able to find a job again in the future. Beatrice also promised to crush Alice with her magic power, but Alice took it all as an empty sound of an angry girl. Beatrice once again reminded about today's exam, which Alice, if she did not pass, would not be able to transfer to the next course and would eventually be permanently expelled from the Magic Academy. The methodology of the exam was actually very simple. The applicant just had to stand in place and shoot spells at a wooden doll 10 meters away from him. Beatrice was completely confident to pass this test. After all, she couldn't even make a pact with the 4 great spirits. But Alice didn't take the insult against her and only concentrated harder on the target. Beatrice was sure that Alice had used some trick by which she was able to create a small fire. But in the exam all these tricks do not work, and so Alice must go away from the Magic Academy. Beatrice scoffed at Alice's heroic behavior, which should have impressed the instructor, but in her opinion it was all just laughter and pity. Beatrice fired the first shot and of course hit the target accurately. The small fire almost completely destroyed the not too stable wooden structure, and that made the many friends of this evil girl cheer. Beatrice enjoyed her superiority and declared that she could shoot 7 fire projectiles in a row. Then Beatrice again began to mock Alice, who in her opinion, of course, could not repeat such success, because her magical abilities had to be at the lowest level. All the students present began to insult and mock Alice behind her back, only adding to her anger and determination. Alice stated what she absolutely knew, telling her friends to isolate her in the academy to make her feel lonely and rejected. Beatrice was surprised, but then recognized that this was indeed true, and Alice's close friend had betrayed her immediately without question. Beatrice started laughing and asked Alice if she really wanted to get back at her after all this time. But the cat girl replied that she didn't really care, because it was all long gone. Alice explained to the angry girl that a lot of time had passed since then and she had learned a lot about the meaning of the word friendship. And now she could only consider as her friends those who were with her on the battlefield and fought on the same side. But Beatrice kept laughing, calling Alice a pathetic slave who was angry because of her terrible fate. But Alice replied to all her foes that she was on different battlefields with them, and then fired small fire toward the target. Immediately the first shot was followed by the next, which continued a precise series of hits on the targets. Shortly before returning to the Magic Academy, Alice practiced with Gabrielle, trying to use her only magical skill as best as possible. Thanks to this, she learned how to create several fireballs at once. Gabrielle was a very capable mentor, incredibly difficult to resist, and in these difficult training bouts Alice was gaining confidence and strength. Shinobu of course realized that Gabrielle was a true Spartan, so part of Alice's training was not only using magical abilities, but also training her physical abilities. Alice gradually enjoyed this training. After all, she wanted to become strong as soon as possible, and so she enjoyed this kind of challenge, feeling good. Shinobu asked the girl if there was any news from the Magic Academy regarding the scrolls. It was known that anyone who could pass the exam could receive a magic scroll up to the 2nd level. But apparently for many years now, no one has been able to get that scroll. Shinobu asked what could be said about the 3rd level and above, because it might be possible to make some progress in that case. But Alice explained that she had no information about it, because it is not the kind of magic that can be controlled by everyone. Shinobu was once again convinced of the difficulty of learning magic after the 3rd level, and it was probably due to the influence of mysterious characters called divine people. And if the locals are weak, there is a complete lack of possibility to reach that level of magic. Although the transfiguration problem itself was indeed a headache, but there were still some things that were troubling. Shinobu knew nothing about that man, the murderous god who had attacked and destroyed Alice's home village. The girl had talked about how that vile bastard had demanded hatred from her and wished for her to become stronger. The killer in the white suit advised the girl to never forget what happened and to keep her hatred for him. After all, only this way she will fight for a chance of revenge, and one day they will meet and Alice will be able to show her accumulated experience. Shinobu apologized to the girl for making her remember the bad moments, but Alice replied that there was no problem with that, because she remembered it all the time and would never forget it even if she wanted to. Shinobu also constantly thought about the assassin god who hunted reincarnated people, for it was hard to even guess who exactly this evil character was. After her intense training, Alice still went to the Magic Guild and promised her teacher to succeed. As a result, during the responsible exam, Alice showed herself with the best side, then silenced all his enemies. Subsequently, no one could believe that it was the same incompetent Alice, because how could manifest such magical abilities in a talentless girl? The results of the exam became widely discussed among the students of the Magic Academy, but Alice tried not to pay attention to all this. Beatrice in one moment lost all her authority, and now for many she became a laughingstock, because she lost to a girl who was considered to be nothing. It was also a pleasure for many to watch Beatrice suffer, for she was also hated by many. Beatrice was furious at such humiliation and promised never to forgive Alice, and at the first opportunity to take revenge. Meanwhile, Alice continued to search for magic scrolls, or rather important information that could be in them. But unfortunately she hadn't managed to find anything useful yet, and only had to wait for the moment when she would become stronger. After the class, Alice met an angry Beatrice, who had been waiting for her for a long time. Alice asked what she wanted from her, as she had no desire to communicate with this angry girl. But Beatrice demanded an explanation of what exactly Alice was feeling right now. The cat girl didn't understand at all what Beatrice wanted to hear from her and asked why they should even talk. But then Beatrice began to accuse Alice that because of her she had become a laughingstock for all the students, and now every person in the academy was discussing and gloating over her defeat during the exam. Alice calmly replied that she was not interested in listening to this nonsense, especially she did not want to see Beatrice ever again in her life. These words made Beatrice even more angry, and she immediately tried to attack her rival. Alice only smiled back and asked if Beatrice was going to attack her with her stupid fireballs again. Beatrice hissed back that this time it would be different. Unexpectedly for Alice, Beatrice tried to use her third-level magic, which was something incredible for the locals of this game. Beatrice enjoyed her superiority at this moment, and decided to use a transference spell. Alice did not expect this turn of events and prepared for the worst. Once again she heard Beatrice's evil laughter as she spoke of a clever trap in which she had invested all her strength, and now Alice would die in terrible agony, and regret having insulted her. In a few seconds, Alice along with Beatrice found themselves in a completely unfamiliar place. Beatrice cheered, for she felt that Alice was afraid. Then the evil girl said that they were hunting for people like Alice, so they had experience and soon Alice would see for herself. Not expecting, a scary man in a black suit appeared nearby, with many brutally murdered people beside him. Beatrice addressed the mysterious monster and called him Vlad, and then offered to have fun with another victim. Vlad's bloody hands looked gruesome. Vlad explained to Beatrice that 1 rank A adventurer and 5 rank B adventurers knew too much, and they must have been political rivals who opposed important people. Beatrice was ecstatic that Vlad had fought a rank A adventurer, and this further confirmed that Vlad was indeed the supreme ancestor of true vampires. Beatrice screamed that together they were absolutely invincible, and now Alice would get a horrible death at Vlad's hands. But Alice kept her cool and asked why a true vampire cage would listen to a normal human, since the true ancestor of vampires is the supreme being of darkness. Vlad explained, not quite confidently, that this was the essence of the agreement and that he was personally interested in those behind Alice. He was not interested in the girl herself, so he would try to kill her quickly. Alice answered that of course she understood Vlad's intention, but at the same time the girl realized that behind this creature is not necessarily someone as powerful as Master Shinobu. After all, only such powerful people could subdue a true vampire ancestor with their power. Also, Alice blamed herself for carelessly falling into this dangerous trap, and so she should try to get out of this difficult situation on her own. But suddenly Vlad began to raise the living dead and declared that now Alice is doomed to a gruesome and painful death. Numerous zombies instantly seized Alice's young body, and Vlad said that this happens to everyone whose blood he consumes, and now it was Alice's turn to become food for him. Beatrice meanwhile continued to laugh and rejoice at Alice's powerlessness, wanting to see her demise as soon as possible. But then Beatrice advised Vlad not to kill Alice now after all, but to start by transferring her alive to the Heisen family's estate. Beatrice explained that she had a ferocious orc at home who would love to meet Alice. After all, they were beasts and should be closer to each other. Vlad decided that this was a terrible idea, completely devoid of taste. Then he said that in fact he did not care how Alice would die, and therefore he did not mind to introduce her to the orc. Alice was horrified by such prospects and tried to escape from the dead embrace of the zombie. But Beatrice only enjoyed Alice's torment and continued to insult her. Alice decided to take her last chance and sought the help of Master Shinobu with the help of her magic amulet. Help came immediately, and the vile vampire Vlad instantly lost his arm. Tsukayami praised Alice for seeking help in time. After all, you can't die so stupidly just because of your stubbornness. Vlad was horrified at how easily he had lost his right arm and hissed in anger, asking the stranger who she was and how dare she attack a vampire. Tsukayami explained that she was one of the 3 great deities of the land of the rising sun, and she was also the lord of eternal darkness and the god of the moon, and therefore had the right to do whatever she wanted. Tsukayomi was happy to enjoy the suffering of a miserable vampire, because it had been a long time since she had been able to display her mighty power. Tsukayami smiled seductively as usual and explained to Vlad that she was the girl who would bring him the most painful death possible. The vampire felt his fangs chattering with fear for the first time in his life.